Chapter 1571. Only when Li Qingshan asked Xiao did he learn that his soul had run off to the Azura realm. He could not help but sigh. That bastard of mine is having fun in the Azura realm. I'm afraid he won't be back for a while. He was not worried that he would be killed. Instead, he felt melancholy and regretful. He should have had a share of that happiness. The joy of killing flowerless ghost immortal Wu Hua should also belong to himself, and this double joy would bring even more joy, whatever, they would reunite in the future. What was mine would be his, and what was his would be mine. There was no need to be so clear about it. At this moment, Little and helped Wu Hua ghost immortal collect his corpse. He collected the primordial spirit fragments and a large pile of artifacts. They then went to the cave abode and investigated it carefully. Only then did they understand what had happened. So the earth veins shifted. That's why the old ghost suddenly woke up. Heaven's will, oh heaven's will. Li Qingshan sighed with a smile. It seemed that they had won against fate again. But this is good. This place is safer than Wu Hua City. No one would barge into a ghost immortal's cave abode. Fortune and misfortune were closely related to fortune. The key was still in oneself. If one was not strong enough, good things could become bad things. If man could overcome nature and go through trials and tribulations, bad things could become good things. After resolving this crisis, the hungry ghost realm's heavens would not be able to accumulate enough coincidences in a short period of time. This period of time was very important. Now that Qingshan had returned, she no longer had any worries. She also had a portion of resources. If she digested it well, she would definitely be able to survive the sixth heavenly tribulation. By then, the hungry ghost realm would no longer be a threat to her. Even if the heavens will arranged for more ghost immortals and corpse immortals to come to her, there was nothing to be afraid of. She pursed her lips. She could even make use of this to wait for rabbits to come to her and eat them on sight. In Li Qingshan's words, it was like food delivery. Time waited for no man. Li Qingshan parted ways with Little and returned to the human realm. In the Shenming cave abode, he began a new round of secluded cultivation. Time flew. But Sun Yu, with a phoenix cry, she rushed out of the abyss and into the clouds. His voice was like the tearing of silk, resounding through the layers of clouds without end. Phoenix transformation had reached a higher level. In an instant, the small world in his body broke through its bottleneck, and a new balance was established amidst its circulation and expansion. Li Qingshan stood on the surface of the water. The pitch-black surface of the water reflected his glorious wings, proudly spread out as he quietly waited for the heavenly tribulation to descend. The sky suddenly darkened. The wind was like the tide, the dark clouds were like the sea, and the abyss was howling. Monstrous waves rose and fell continuously, as if the entire sea was churning. A wave the size of a small mountain surged into the sky and fiercely slammed into the cliff. Boom! Raging waves beat against the shore, rocks flew everywhere, and cliffs cracked. Li Qingshan looked up, and suddenly he could feel the feeling of watching flowerless ghost immortal being crushed to death by a mountain. The dark clouds became thicker and thicker, pressing down on the mountain peak as if the sky was covering it. This heavy and deep nether cave abode was like a small boat in a storm, swaying in the wind and rain. Cracks crawled all over the cliff, and large pieces of the cliff fell into the sea, stirring up even more turbulent waves. The Nether Grand Formation was still operating, supporting the entire cave abode, but in the face of this mighty heavenly might, it seemed so fragile. The core of the formation suddenly flickered a few times, and rapidly dimmed. The sound of raging winds, torrential rain, raging waves, and shattering mountains surged in from all directions. The only thing that had not been heard was the sound of thunder. Therefore, this rumbling world seemed terrifyingly silent. This was no ordinary sixth heavenly tribulation. How could a mere human resist such heavenly might? Can I? Li Qingshan asked himself. From the perspective of a spirit turtle, his accumulation was far from enough. His cultivation had risen too quickly, and it was inevitable that his foundation would be unstable. Furthermore, it was easy to incur the jealousy of the heavens, and it was destined that the heavens would triumph over man. Crash. Corpses fell like rain in the cave abode. Crash. A huge stalagmite broke off and smashed towards Li Qingshan. With a boom, it fell into the water, and the huge waves surged. Li Qingshan's figure was nowhere to be seen. No matter how many things are, they are always urgent. Li Qingshan chanted proudly, stepping on the waves. Heaven and earth turn, time presses on. His demonic aura surged into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds, contending with the heavens. 10,000 years is too long, I can only seize the moment. Lightning flashed, and the world became as bright as day, illuminating the entire abyss. Boom! An extremely deep rumble. Rather than calling it thunder, it was more like the sound of a drum. With the thunder as the drumstick and the heavens as the drum's surface, he struck out with all sorts of attacks. The mountain abyss that was struggling to hold on instantly collapsed, as if it was collapsing from the inside. It swallowed Li Qingshan, and he fell into the abyss. Li Qingshan's organs were about to rupture, and his bones were about to shatter. Blood surged through his throat, dyeing his lips red. He had never faced such a terrifying heavenly might. It was like swatting a fly, and the sad thing was that he was that pitiful fly. Listening to the heavenly wrath, he licked his lips, and his blood boiled. He unfurled his wings to the extreme, clenched his fists tightly, and punched out a rising dragon. A person broke through millions of tons of earth and rocks, overlooking the sea and facing the heavens. The boundless waves and mountain ranges were like giant hands, as if they wanted to pull him down into the bottomless abyss, and also as if they wanted to lift him up high. The four seas churn, the clouds rage, the 5 continents tremble, the wind and thunder surge. He grinned and opened his arms towards the sky. Come! So what if it's a fly? So what if it's an ant? This is the life I want. This is me, Li Qingshan. The sky full of wind and thunder pounced towards him. They converged into a giant lightning axe in midair, and it chopped down. There was not even a single ordinary bolt of lightning that descended. The first attack was tribulation lightning condensed into a weapon. The oppressive air, the terrifying might, and the formless laws tightly bound him from all directions. It was airtight, and it was like he was suffocating. He did not care, and only punched out. Bang! The void shook, and countless cracks appeared, shaking off the lightning axe. At this time, a huge black shadow appeared in the deep sea, and it was unknown how long it was, and it emitted a nauseating stench. Li Qingshan focused his eyes and saw that it was a floating corpse. It looked like it had been soaked in water for too long, and it looked like a giant. Its pale skin was covered with veins, and its stomach was bulging like it was about to explode. Looking closely, although the face of the floating corpse was blurry, it looked somewhat similar to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's heart trembled, and great terror surged. That was his death. It was not even tragic, and it was just ugly to the point of being disgusting. At this time, tribulation lightning condensed into a weapon. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, tridents. 18 types of weapons, all of them hanging under the sky, pointed at him. He felt like he was in a nightmare, and he just stared blankly at the floating corpse. Suddenly, the floating corpse roared and stood up. Its body was unbelievably light, and it pounced on him. His body swelled up, and his life force rapidly flowed away. He gave off an overwhelming stench, and he tottered about as the world spun around him. He circulated the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression at full strength and suppressed his mind. Suddenly, he came to a realization. The Death Demon. The Death Demon was the most terrifying demon below the Empyrean Demon. Normally speaking, the 6th heavenly tribulation should have come across a vexing demon. He had no idea what he had done to actually run into a death demon. Chapter 1572. Li Qingshan's face was swollen and twisted. It was ashen, basically no different from a dead person. His mood was just as ugly as his complexion. The path of great freedom could originally ensure that he would not be disturbed by external demons when he underwent the tribulation. It gave him a great advantage. However, during the 4th heavenly tribulation, the inner demons caused a backlash. His nascent soul directly turned into a demonic infant, wanting to destroy itself. It almost killed him. During the 5th heavenly tribulation, he lost his Een spirit, so he did not enjoy this benefit. He only defeated the 5 Een demons after tremendous effort. Finally, during the 6th heavenly tribulation, his soul just fucking rebelled and ran away. Who knew where it was enjoying itself right now? In the end, no matter how he thought about it, he actually did not run away even once. Alas, what a cruel fate. Now that the death demon was possessing him, it devoured his life force furiously. He powered the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression desperately, but he could not find anything to suppress. The death demon had completely merged with him. Death is something that we are born with. An icy cold, sinister voice rang out, but it originated from his head as if it was his inner voice. Wait, have you made a mistake? I'm not a human immortal. Death is the fairest thing in the world. Whether it's a beggar or an emperor, whether it's an ant or a true dragon. He cried out in his heart, but he was immediately interrupted by his inner voice. Captain, don't shoot. We're on the same side. Actually, I'm a demon too. Death is unavoidable. Whether it's an insufferably arrogant cultivator or a celestial blessed with great fortune. Motherfucker. Celestial decay, right? Celestial decay. First, dirty clothes. Second, withered hair. Third, sweating under the armpits. Fourth, smelly body. Fifth, not being happy. As long as an Asura's battle spirit remained, they could not die. Celestials possessed powerful life force and long lifespans. They were almost immortal. However, their battle spirit would eventually tire out. They were not truly immortal. Even celestials would reach the end of their lives. The 5 signs of decay meant that death was imminent. Human immortals were practically immortal already. They only feared 2 things. One was the book of life and death. The other was the death demon. The former could still be avoided and discussed. The worst-case scenario was to reincarnate and start all over again. The latter, on the other hand, was much more terrifying. The dead demon could neither escape nor be bribed. It didn't matter if you were a divine general of the heavenly palace or a sect leader. Once you died, your soul would be destroyed and you would never be able to reincarnate. If he wanted to become a true immortal, he would have to take this risk. However, for some reason, Li Qingshan did not reach that step at all. Instead, he attracted Death Demon. With his current cultivation, he didn't have any way to fight back. He could only take it head-on with his life. If not for his fiend god bloodline, which granted him an extremely long lifespan, he would have died before being struck by lightning. But if this went on, he wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. Furthermore, under the state of heavenly decay, one's mind was restless and confused. While he was in a daze, a chain-shaped tribulation lightning condensed into a weapon tightly wrapped around him. Before he could react, several lightning bolts flashed and tore him into pieces. With a buzzing sound, countless crisscrossing streaks of lightning slashed back and forth, cutting him into pieces. Not even a complete finger was left behind. With a phoenix cry, Li Qingshan underwent nirvana rebirth in the raging flames. However, to his despair, he discovered that Death Demon was still tightly attached to his body. Even bone maggots weren't enough to describe it. He gritted his teeth and was extremely furious. Scram! The inner voice sounded again. Death is unavoidable. Rebirth is just an illusion. Scram! Another stern shout came from the clouds, like a command. In the surging tribulation clouds, the lightning illuminated that person's face. It was Li Qingshan. Death Demon was shocked. Heavenly Demon? Under the tribulation clouds, in the endless lightning, Li Qingshan looked at Li Qingshan. They suddenly looked at each other and smiled. Death Demon said gloomily, "So it's the Heavenly Demon descendant. If you were the one undergoing tribulation, I would naturally retreat. But he isn't you, so I'm afraid this isn't up to you. Also, if I'm not wrong, you were split from his body. He died here, so you can replace him." "No, you're wrong. He is me and I am him. And whether I die or not is not up to you." Li Qingshan descended from the sky. Li Qingshan welcomed him. The two Li Qingshan merged into one. One started a life and death struggle with Death Demon, while the other faced the tribulation lightning that filled the sky. A shooting star suddenly streaked across the sky of the small world. A huge swollen corpse fell from the sky. It was Death Demon. However, Li Qingshan grabbed his throat tightly and punched his face. The speed of his descent suddenly increased. With a loud boom, he smashed onto the ground, shaking the entire world. Death Demon shouted, "You broke the laws of the heavenly tribulation. Master will not forgive you. That is your master and your laws." Li Qingshan stepped on Death Demon and rained down punches. The small world rumbled and countless mountain peaks collapsed. Death Demon struggled and roared. His body swelled and became 10,000 zhang, 1,000,000 zhang, 1,000,000 zhang. Li Qingshan became bigger and bigger until he filled the entire world. The circulation of the miniature world paused. At this exact moment, a lightning hammer condensed from tribulation lightning fell down. Li Qingshan used his innate ability and threw a punch, but the power of tremors on his fist suddenly dispersed. The lightning hammer smashed him into the ocean, shattering him to pieces. In an instant he hit the bottom of the sea. The island foundation of the Xianming cave abode cracked, and scorching lava spewed out from the cracks, creating huge waves. In the surging lava, Li Qingshan had just regained his vision when he saw countless lightning bolts flashing over. His waist tightened, and he was tightly bound by the lightning chain again. If he couldn't suppress this Death Demon today, only death awaited him. Death Demon continued to expand, wanting to burst out of the small world. He laughed sinisterly. "Even though you are the descendant of Heavenly Devil, you are still too young. I have a question. Will Death Demon also die? What do you want to do?" Li Qingshan stabbed his hands into Death Demon's chest and drilled in. Death Demon's eyes widened, and Li Qingshan's smile appeared on his face. His body twisted and began to shrink rapidly. When the small world recovered its operation, Li Qingshan roared and broke free of the lightning chain. He spread his wings of wind and flapped them with all his might. He split the sea and swept away the countless tribulation lightning weapons' encirclement. He rushed into the sky and shattered the lightning hammer with one punch. Crimson patterns interweaved, and the tiger's roar shook heaven and earth. Tiger Demon was furious. It was common for one to be angry and fall into the evil path when one was on the decline of the heavens. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tiger Demon transformation broke through again. In a split second his blood boiled, and his murderous intent surged like the wind, filling the sky with lightning. In the small world, Death Demon had turned into a warped lump of flesh, struggling and rolling. Sometimes, 2 arms would appear and strangle his throat. Sometimes, 2 heads would grow and tear at each other. Li Qingshan seemed to have the upper hand, but his lifespan was being continuously devoured by Death Demon, and his primordial spirit was also showing signs of the decline of the heavens. However, he had absolute confidence that he could drag Death Demon to the grave with him. They were entangled together, and the decline of the heavens became indistinguishable. Since death was unavoidable, Death Demon had to die as well. Death Demon felt a wave of terror. He didn't expect this heavenly devil successor to be so crazy, not hesitating to die together. So even Death Demon is afraid of death. Li Qingshan faced death with equanimity and threw himself into the embrace of death together. Death Demon finally couldn't hold on any longer. "Let me go, you win." After destroying the last tribulation lightning weapon, Li Qingshan's broken body fell into the sea. The clouds and wind dispersed, and the sea regained its calm. A ray of multicolored light shot out from the gaps in the clouds, illuminating his smiling face. His primordial spirit was also smiling. Even if Death Demon had taken almost all of his lifespan and he was on the verge of death, it didn't matter. The 9 heavens haven't arrived. The 2 Li Qingshan said together, "I can't die yet." Chapter 1573. Ha 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 ha. Li Qingshan laughed heartily. The sea reverberated, and the waves rose again. There was a thunderous boom, and light streaked across the horizon. His laughter was still echoing, and the waves were still surging, but he was nowhere to be seen. The sun set, the moon rose, and the stars twinkled. In the middle of the sky, a star suddenly went out, and a star on the horizon shone a little brighter. The sky-devouring beasts never stopped devouring, and the world of the 5 continents continued to expand. From an insignificant and weak star, it gradually became a bright star. Others might not understand the significance of this. After all, there were countless stars in the sky, and the birth and destruction of the world was just a natural phenomenon. On the peak of the mountains, Luo Ho Xiaoming looked up alone, as if he had returned to many years ago, when he had shot down the stars with a slingshot. But he was no longer the him of that time, and his eyes were full of nostalgia. That was the place where he had obtained a new life after being burned by karmic fire. It could even be called his hometown. In his eyes, there was not much difference between the stars. Destruction did not need any reason. It was just a game. And now, the game had begun again. This time, his target was some other unusual stars. The heavens, the gods. Azura only treated the strong as opponents, and attacked those who thought themselves extraordinary. Before that, he had to obtain the qualifications to stand on equal footing with them. Thunder rumbled in the distant sky, and the red sky watched him silently. In the palace that belonged to Nidam, Princess Qin of the Luo clan was awakened by the thunder in the distance. She looked around, and the curtains were down. He had disappeared. Her whole body was limp and weak, and she curled up her slender white legs. She felt a trace of pain, and she could not help but frown. Looking at the patch of red on the jade couch, he sighed. That sigh was heartbreaking and intoxicating, and she was willing to pay anything to smooth out the wrinkles between her brows. I have exposed my identity and betrayed him. I'm afraid he will regard me as his exclusive property, and it will be difficult for me to return to the heavenly law. Even the battle god Nidam did not dare to easily possess her, because once he obtained her, he would not have the heart to kill her. The so-called femme fatale would harm others and herself. Beauty, why are you sighing? Li Qingshan suddenly appeared beside the bed. He lifted the curtain and looked at her. Princess Qin lowered her head and hugged her chest. She curled up and didn't say anything, which made her look even more charming. Li Qingshan licked his lips. Get dressed. I'll take you back to the heavenly axiom. Princess Qin raised her head in surprise. You want to send me back? Do you think I would lie to you? If it were any other day, Li Qingshan might have been reluctant to part with it and asked her to thank him a few more times. However, now that he had just overcome his 6th heavenly tribulation, he was in high spirits and ready to do something big. What femme fatale? Peerless beauty? He didn't care about them at all. Princess Qin's heart relaxed, but she also felt a lot of resentment. She put down her arms, stood up, and elegantly put on her clothes. She looked deeply at him with her clear eyes. You're even more heartless than Needham. Li Qingshan was thinking about how he could go on a rampage and do whatever he wanted. He was beaming with joy. What? Nothing. Strange woman. Li Qingshan shrugged his shoulders, grabbed her waist, and disappeared from the palace. On the vast ocean, Princess Qin immediately said, This is not the heavenly axiom. This is the mortal realm. Although one could reach the heavenly axiom from the Azura path, there were many checkpoints and heavily guarded areas. If they were not careful, they might be attacked by both sides. Although Li Qingshan wasn't afraid, he didn't want to charge through the checkpoints. Of course, it was better to sneak in. The 5 continents were devouring other worlds, so the heaven-climbing vine was needed. Luckily, he was prepared and took a bud for Yuan Yaozhu to help him grow. After flying across the ocean, they arrived at the 100-herb garden. Li Fengyuan was still deep in thought under the golden leaf Bodhi tree. Even when Li Qingshan arrived, he didn't seem to notice. Yuan Yaozhu was very happy and invited them into the cave. Eldest senior brother, who is this? She's a princess just like you. Princess Qin said angrily. The heavenly axiom was the princess of the Luo race. How could a princess from a small country be compared to her? From bloodline to status, they were completely different. So it's Princess Qin. Yuan Yaozhu looked at them and guessed their relationship. Don't mind her. Li Qingshan used his finger to draw a few circles next to his ear, indicating that there was something wrong with this woman's head. I saw it, Princess Qin said angrily. She wasn't someone who easily lost her temper, but this man was just too good at making people angry. Li Qingshan ignored her and patted Ruan Yaozhu's shoulder. You don't need to call me eldest senior brother. I won't be eldest senior brother soon. You won't be eldest senior brother? Ruan Yaozhu was shocked but felt that it was natural. With his current cultivation, the position of eldest senior brother of the Myriad Forms sect could no longer accommodate him. The Myriad Forms sect was just a springboard for him, and they had only met by chance. He just didn't expect them to part so quickly. However, his heart tightened. Where are you going? Are you going to the desireless heavenly palace above the ninth heaven to be with senior sister Chao? For the vast majority of human immortals, the best way out after transcending the sixth heavenly tribulation was to go above the ninth heaven and become a heavenly official divine general. Then, they wouldn't have to worry about the king of hell chasing after them. Of course, they had to use some connections and find some connections. There were very few people like Chao Tianjiao who were immediately taken to the heavenly palace as soon as they succeeded in transcending the tribulation. It was only because she walked the path of true martial that she received the special attention of great Emperor True Martial. As for someone like Li Qingshan who had no connections or connections, all he could do was hope that the Demon Lord would guide him, a junior. However, the Demon Lord had sent Death Demon, who had almost killed him. As a result, he could only give up on this thought. Now, the best way was of course to ask Chao Tianjiao to put in a good word for him in front of Emperor True Martial and see if there were any vacancies among the 6 armored divine generals for him to fill. However, after going through so many hardships, how could he be someone's lackey? Why should I be with that madwoman? He wanted to walk up above the ninth heaven in an upright manner and fight his way up, and he didn't want to sneak up and climb up. Aren't the two of you Dao companions? Only a ghost would be willing to be Dao companions with that madwoman. Li Qingshan denied flatly. Princess Qin said coldly, Are there any normal women in your eyes? Of course, the one before you is one. Not only is she normal, she's even a good woman. Li Qingshan smiled gently as he gazed at Ruan Yaozhu. During these years in the mortal realm, she'd helped him greatly, and she'd never asked for anything in return. Even if this Princess Bailu didn't have a soul-stealing voice, didn't have an enchanting and charming appearance, and sometimes seemed to be extremely stiff, she was extremely cute in his heart. Senior brother, you're too kind. Ruan Yaozhu's face blushed, and it grew redder and redder while she spoke in a voice that was like the buzzing of a mosquito. Then where are you going? I'm going on a long journey. Li Qingshan's eyes were bright and full of spirit, and it seemed as if his gaze had penetrated through all obstacles to arrive at the distant future and the unknown new world. Ruan Yaozhu originally wanted to ask when he would return, or if he would return, yet she suddenly understood something and said with relief, I wish you a pleasant journey. If you have any wishes, then tell me. I'm very strong now. Li Qingshan raised his right arm and displayed his muscles. Ruan Yaozhu smiled lightly. I'll tell you the next time you come. Li Qingshan was stunned. All right. Under Ruan Yaozhu's gaze, Li Qingshan left the 100-herb garden with Princess Qin and the heaven-climbing vine. Chapter 1574. Li Qingshan planted the sky-climbing vine on the remnant island of the Xianming cave abode. He casually used the Qilin's ability and the green vines grew rapidly, stretching out tentacles as they climbed up. Plants like ivy and dodder, however, had no support at all and soared straight up into the clouds. The top of the vine reached an extremely high altitude and suddenly pierced into the void, continuing to grow. You can go now. Li Qingshan clapped his hands as if he had just finished a small task and was dusting off unnecessary dust. Princess Qin, however, did not move and said with a bitter expression, You said you would send me back. That's right, the heavenly Tao is above us. Who knows? Maybe it's the hungry ghost realm? Maybe it's the demon realm? And even if it's the heavenly Tao, I'm just a weak girl. Maybe I'll fall into the hands of the bad guys and enter the wolf's den after leaving the tiger's den. As Princess Qin spoke, she was on the verge of tears. If you can't bear to part with me, just say it. Li Qingshan crossed his arms and curled his lips. No matter what, This girl had the cultivation of 5 heavenly tribulations and could not be considered a weak girl. I can't bear to part with you. Princess Qin tightly grabbed onto Li Qingshan's arm and looked as if she would cry if he didn't accompany her to the heavenly Tao. If Lord is really unwilling, I can't force you. If I meet evil demons, I will definitely protect Lord with my life. Protect your sister, do we know each other that well? Sigh, so troublesome. I'll send you there. Actually, Li Qingshan was also a bit curious as to what the heavenly Tao looked like. Among the 6 paths of reincarnation, only the heavenly Tao had not been to. With his current cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for him to enter and take a look. Princess Qin's tears turned into a smile. Thank you, Lord. Li Qingshan hugged her waist again and they walked into the sky-climbing vine together. They followed the winding path up until they reached the border of the mortal realm. Suddenly, a boundless golden light blossomed in front of them. Flowers fell from the sky and golden lotuses appeared on the ground. The sound of chanting came from the endless light. Even a Kinaro like Princess Qin became absent-minded when she heard it. If one were to look at it from the sea, the sky-climbing vine would be dyed a pure gold color from top to bottom. Then, it would shatter inch by inch, scattering golden powder all over the sky. This light, I think I've seen it somewhere before. In a trance, he saw the goddess Nuwa mending the sky, the Kylin running, the phoenix soaring, the golden auspicious clouds, the Buddha smiling, break. He gritted his teeth and opened the divine eye on his forehead. All the illusions disappeared. The golden radiance dimmed a lot, but it didn't dissipate. As far as the eye could see, there was a flourishing garden filled with golden leaf Bodhi trees. The ground was paved with golden bricks, and the sun was shining brightly above. Is this the heavenly Tao? Li Qingshan stepped on the gold bricks and looked up at the sky. For some reason, he felt a strange sense of familiarity and belonging. At first, he thought that he was the son of destiny of the heavenly Tao, which was why he had such a feeling. After all, he had 3 sacred bloodlines, so it was not strange for him to be favored by heaven's will. But when he thought about it carefully, it seemed that it wasn't just that. Lord, have we arrived? Princess Qin rubbed her eyes and asked in a daze. Who are you asking? Li Qingshan said unhappily. He didn't know why he couldn't sense the heaven-climbing vine, which meant that his path of retreat had been cut off. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't feel any threat or hostility, he would almost suspect that this was a trap. I'm confused. Princess Qin smiled apologetically. Her smile was gentle and elegant, and the melancholy on her face suddenly disappeared. The two strolled in the garden. Princess Qin hugged Li Qingshan's arm. At first glance, it seemed like a pair of lovers meeting in the forest. However, Li Qingshan felt that it was more and more unusual. The mysterious feeling was like the growth of plants. He didn't feel any discomfort, but instead felt extremely comfortable, carefree. This was definitely not the 3,000 worlds. A normal world couldn't contain the existence of a Yao god. However, it wasn't like the 6 paths of reincarnation either. The laws of heaven and earth were hidden very deeply, so deeply that it was difficult to see through them. It was as if they were covered by some kind of power, and it was impossible to determine the nature and source of this power. Perhaps this meant that this world was a higher-level world than the human path and Yao beast path. Or perhaps it was a special attribute of the heavenly path, like the hell path. Lord, this doesn't seem to be the heavenly path. Princess Qin bit her lips as if she couldn't believe it. Her eyes were filled with inconceivable surprise. Are you sure? This seems to be the Western paradise. Li Qingshan's body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. What did you say? It can't be wrong, it can't be wrong. This is the Western paradise. That was great. Great. Princess Qin was so excited that her body trembled. A breeze blew over, and she let go of Li Qingshan's arm. She leaped into the air and actually danced among the Bodhi tree. She let out a bell-like laughter, extremely happy. Li Qingshan was dumbfounded. He stood there in a daze. I've gone to the Western paradise? How could a normal person go to the Western paradise just like that? All of a sudden, he remembered where he had seen that golden light. It was in the Battle of Black Cloud City. Abbot Yangon had sacrificed himself, and a ray of light had fallen from the sky and taken away his soul. That light seemed to be called the Buddha's light of guidance. Lord, meeting you is Qin's greatest fortune in this life. Princess Qin returned to him and bowed. She was as happy as a little girl. I'm simply too lucky. In the words of Taoism, fortune and misfortune are interdependent, and misfortune turns to fortune. Didn't you want to return to the heavenly path? The heavenly path? How can the heavenly path compare to the Western paradise? Most celestials believed in Buddhism, and their greatest wish was not to pass the tribulation and become immortals, but to enter the Western paradise. Buddha said, "Why is that place named Western paradise? All living beings in the country have no suffering and can enjoy all kinds of pleasures, hence the name Western paradise." After entering the Western paradise, one would be able to completely break away from the 5 impure evil world. They would not suffer from greed, anger, delusion, slowness, and doubt, and they would not fall into the 5 decrepit realms. The Western paradise was blessed by the Buddha's great compassion wish. There were no demons outside, no worries inside, and one's lifespan was eternal. The word, Western paradise, was definitely not a lie. How can you be sure that this is the Western paradise? Li Qingshan did not believe that there was such a good thing in the world. Princess Qin smiled and said, "Lord, listen carefully." Li Qingshan listened carefully. When the wind blew past the golden leaf Bodhi tree, it was not the sound of normal leaves rustling. There was a wondrous rhythm to it, and it had a metallic tinkling sound. There was also the sound of birds singing, which formed a wondrous music that made people feel intoxicated and tranquil. Buddha said, "All living beings in this land will chant Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha when they hear this sound." I couldn't help but dance in the sky when I heard this sound. Maybe we just entered a Buddhist holy land by mistake. Li Qingshan continued to refute, and he was more inclined to believe that he had fallen into a trap. Princess Qin faintly smiled and tapped his chest with her slender finger. "I originally had a lot of resentment towards you. I blamed you for taking my chastity, but I also blamed you for not being kind to the fairer sex. However, I was grateful to you for saving my life, so I couldn't help but want to rely on you and make you my Tao companion. That's why I lured you to the heavenly law, hoping that you would change your mind. I was really worried. However, after coming to this Western paradise, I suddenly felt relieved. There was no resentment or hatred in my heart. Instead, I was filled with gratitude. I felt that this was a fortuitous encounter bestowed by the heavens. Why should I let fate take its course? Why worry about personal feelings? I don't hope to be together with Lord, I just hope that Lord is well. If it wasn't the Western paradise, what other place could be so wondrous?" Li Qingshan squinted his eyes and looked over. Princess Qin's words were filled with sincerity. There was no falsehood at all. He should have felt apologetic and moved, but instead he felt a chill in his heart. He couldn't help but look at himself and found that the ox demon, tiger demon, ape demon, and other demonic thoughts were weakening. Letting go of his obsession, forgetting his anger, and no longer being obsessed, was this a good thing? It had to be said that it made him feel very happy and comfortable. He had never felt so relaxed in his life. However, it also made him feel an indescribable fear. With his Yao god cultivation and his identity as the descendant of the demonic god, this world was actually able to silently affect his thoughts. Other than the legendary Western paradise, where else could it be? In the face of the Buddha's great compassion wish, what was the faith of a little demon god? Li Qingshan said decisively, "No, I can't stay here." But Princess Qin was extremely shocked and almost wanted to ask, "Are you stupid? I promised to send you back to the heavenly law, but this isn't the heavenly law. Also, don't forget that we snuck in here. Maybe someone will come and chase us away immediately. They might even say that they don't want to kill us. Lord, you promised me a goat carriage and a deer carriage, but now you gave me a white ox carriage. I can't be happier. Not to mention me, even Buddha won't blame you. You might as well say that Buddha did it. You're looking down on this Western paradise too much, using the heavenly law as a comparison. The celestials are arrogant, reserved, and stingy. Buddha is merciful and boundless, so why would anyone chase us away or even kill us? Those who aren't fated will go through thousands of twists and turns. Those who are fated will ascend to the Western paradise. If you're here, then you're here. If you're fated, then you're fated. Princess Qin smiled and sighed. She shook her head with an expression of being enlightened. Her words were filled with the meaning of Zen. She had already drawn a clear line between herself and the lowly celestials. Li Qingshan felt his balls ache. This could be considered as being illuminated by the lighthouse of democracy and freedom, so he still ran in. His biggest worry right now was whether there was some kind of conspiracy here. He was afraid that Buddha would suddenly appear and slap him to death with Buddha's palm. Princess Qin, why do you think we're being guided here? Is it because your piety moved Buddha? Of course not. I've always done nothing, so how can I be guided by Buddha's light? Sir, do you have a vocation? Writing novels? He remembered that he was a disciple of a novel school. Writing novels was his vocation. No, I'm talking about a position in the heavenly palace. I've just passed the 6th heavenly tribulation not long ago. I don't have any connections, so how can I have a position? That's right. I think you've been chosen as the celestial general of Sangha. Li Qingshan had heard of this term before. The so-called divine general of Sangharama was the divine protector general of Buddhism. It was another path, another system outside of the heavenly palace. It was the path that monks walked. He remembered that Mahasvara was also one of the heavens, so it could also belong to Buddhism. Celestial demons were also gods and Buddhas. And a long, long time ago, he was a layman disciple of Buddhism. Damn, this really was chanting Buddha, chanting Dharma, chanting Sangha. Sir, you're fated with Buddha. Thus, he remembered that all the monks he had met in his life seemed to have said the same thing. He had always treated these words as a joke. Even if Abbot Yangon came to persuade him, his will couldn't be shaken. Never would he have thought that his words would come true. He accidentally entered the pure land of bliss and became the celestial general of Sangha. What an ill-fated fate. Chapter 1575. However, Li Qingshan also heaved a sigh of relief. Since he had become a divine general, there probably wouldn't be a palm technique that could descend from the sky. Right now, it was better to think about how to get out of this ghastly place. The scenery of this resplendent garden paved with golden bricks was indeed extremely beautiful, but there was not a single soul in sight. There was only a magic altar and a few fine houses. Although it couldn't be considered a ruin, there was an indescribable desolation that made people feel lonely. He glanced at Princess Qin. She seemed to be completely unaware and had a silly smile on her face. Hearing that he was leaving, she was reluctant to part. "I've fulfilled my promise. If you want to stay, then stay." Li Qingshan waved his hand and left. The moment he stepped out of the garden, a sandstorm suddenly blew over and he almost couldn't open his eyes. After the sandstorm passed, he suddenly looked back. The Bodhi tree and the spell altar were gone. The garden had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a field of white sand. Princess Qin stood there in a daze. The smile on her face hadn't even faded yet. "What did you do?" As Li Qingshan was thinking, a golden light flew over from the horizon and landed in front of him. It was a golden leaf. The golden leaf flickered and a dignified and kind voice came out. "You must be the new divine general Sangha." "That's right. Follow me." The golden leaf flew over and Li Qingshan followed closely behind. In an instant, they arrived at a dazzling hall. On the shining golden plaque were written the words, "Sangha Shrine." The golden leaf floated in and landed in a plump palm. Li Qingshan looked up and saw a dignified and easygoing middle-aged man. The aura he emitted told him that this was a true god. "I am the god Sangha." Li Qingshan didn't dare to be careless. He cupped his hands and said, "I am Li Qingshan. Greetings, goddess." The god Sangha put his palms together and returned the greeting with a smile. "You are not a Buddhist disciple." Li Qingshan immediately put his palms together and said, "Lay disciple, lay disciple." He thought for a moment and decided not to hide anything. "I practice the Tao of great freedom." He had thought that the Sangarama deity would look down on him, the descendant of the heavenly demon who had been smeared with dirt. It would be best if it got angry and chased him out of this pure land. However, the Sangarama deity's smile did not change and it did not seem to care at all. Li Qingshan could only ask, "What does Divine General Kalin need to do?" He must be a character like the Double Flower Red Rod, who went around slaying demons and devils, shouting, "I will destroy you on behalf of Buddha." He could seize the opportunity to slip away. However, the Sangarama deity disappointed him again. "Don't be impatient. You have just arrived at the pure land of ultimate bliss. You can take a look around first." Li Qingshan made up his mind. "May I ask how I can get out of here?" "Get out." The Sangarama deity was also surprised. Most people who came to this pure land of ultimate bliss would be overjoyed and grateful. There had never been anyone who was in a hurry to leave. "To tell you the truth, I once swore the Nether River Blood Oath." Li Qingshan did not hide anything and told it everything about his bet with demon god Qiongqi. "Now that the time of the bet is approaching, I need to hurry to the demon domain and fight to the death with that demon god." When he reached the end of his sentence, his face was full of heroism. He had the aura of, "The wind is howling, the water is cold, the hero will never return." Qingqi Mountain was Qiongqi's base camp. It had a great geographical advantage and was a true god himself. Even with the mountain shifting token, he might not be able to topple Qingqi Mountain easily. However, he was now a member of an organization. There were so many mighty figures in the Buddhist sections. They would not want a new follower like him to die for nothing. If the Sangarama deity was willing to lend a hand and summon a few Vajra Arhats, he would be able to watch Qingqi Mountain fall. As the spirit tortoise transformation matured, my wisdom is really increasing day by day. I see. No wonder you were chosen as the Sangarama deity general. At such a young age, you dare to fight against a demon god. Impressive, impressive. The Sangarama deity patted Li Qingshan's shoulder in admiration. "However, you don't have to worry. As long as you stay in this pure land of ultimate bliss, even if the 12 demon gods work together, they won't be able to do anything to you." "But I heard that the Nether River Blood Oath is very powerful," the Sangarama deity said proudly. "Don't forget where you are. How can a mere oath compare to the Buddha's great compassion wish? Just stay here peacefully." "Wait, this is different from what I planned." Li Qingshan finally understood what a large organization was. Although Qiongqi was terrifying, he was on the same level as the Sangarama deity. They were both true gods. In the Buddhist sects, there were countless mighty figures of this level. There were at least 17 or 18 arhats, and above them were the 4 great bodhisattvas. Above them were the Buddhas. What Nether River Blood Oath? In front of our leader, Brother Rulai, it was like a fart. If you don't like it, come, stick your head over here and let Brother Rulai explain it to you. Li Qingshan said with grief and indignation, "Are we just going to let that Qiongqi continue to be arrogant? Good will be rewarded, and evil will be punished. When he is filled with evil, he won't be able to escape this calamity. Qingshan, you are violating the precepts of anger." He immediately put his palms together and recited a poem. "With a thought of anger, the forest of merits will be set on fire. With a thought of anger, the doors of millions of obstacles will be opened." In the end, the Sangarama deity did not tell him how to leave this pure land of ultimate bliss. Perhaps it saw through his plan to kill with a borrowed knife, or perhaps it was worried that he would run over and fight Qiongqi. Li Qingshan could not force a true god. After some calculations, he realized that he still had a year and a half, so he had to think of a way himself. Thus, he soared into the sky, chose a direction, and flew through the air. In just half a day, he gave up. This pure land of ultimate bliss was very similar to the ultimate ruins. Not only was it boundless, but it was also outside of the 6 paths of reincarnation. There was no so-called boundary or exit. Moreover, it was also constantly affecting his mind. Peaceful and joyful feelings gushed out from the bottom of his heart endlessly like a spring. Like sunlight melting snow, it erased the ox demon's obsession. Like removing firewood from the bottom of a cauldron, it pacified the tiger demon's fury. Like clear sunlight, it diluted the ape demon's obsession. Rather than calling this a feeling of joy, it was more like relief. He had let go of the heavy burden he had always shouldered. He even recalled the beauty of his childhood, the picturesque scenery of Crouching Ox Village, and the simplicity and purity of the villagers. His elder brother and sister-in-law had also shown a gentle side in the past, but it was not just bullying and humiliation. He gritted his teeth and shook his head violently, wanting to chase these thoughts away. However, even though he was the successor of the Empyrean demon, he was actually unable to do anything about it. These thoughts did not originate from the outside world. Instead, they originated from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, why would he challenge the Black Wind stronghold? Why would he leave the money to his elder brother and sister-in-law? Why would he want to release Brother Ox? These were all the beauty and emotions in his heart. However, if this continued, all of the demon transformations would regress, or in other words, they had already begun to regress. Even the foundations of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine would cease to exist. Everyone possesses a Buddhist nature in their hearts. All beings can become Buddhas, the holy azure deity murmured. He could tell that Li Qingshan was hiding many things and had many selfish motives, but he did not take it to heart. Many people who had just arrived in Pure Land of ultimate bliss were like that. But in the end, they would be purified by this pure land and become brand new. Even the world of freedom had to lower its head before the Buddha, so what was a mere successor of the Empyrean demon? Chapter 1576. Li Qingshan clutched his head with both hands, his brows furrowed. His body arched and his spine stood tall, like a struggling ox. A strange smile hung at the corner of his mouth. The various demonic transformations began to recede. Ox demon's strength sinks in the mud. If all mud no longer existed, what was the point of clinging to it? If one could enjoy it, who would be willing to suffer? This was bliss, pure land without pain. He roared at the sky, the wind and clouds surging. He bared his fangs and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His mind calmed down in an instant. He had already made up his mind. Phoenix's nirvana. The bright red flames spread and engulfed everything, but that was not enough. As long as the beautiful and moving memories remained, he could not resist this bliss. He could not give it up, nor was he willing to give it up. Memories were one. How could they be clearly distinguished between beauty and ugliness, moving emotions and pain? How could he not know that little and had killed countless people and committed heinous crimes? But in his eyes, there was no difference between beauty and bones. They were both his little N. How should he separate these memories? With a long sigh, he activated the spirit turtle transformation. His eyes suddenly became blank, as if all his thoughts had been emptied. His reflection of the clear blue sky was also burned by the raging fire, falling from the sky. Boom! A streak of light flew past, landing in a field. An old couple hurried over. Smoke and fire lingered in the air, and sparks flew in their faces. They could not immediately approach. But they did not seem to know fear. The old man picked up his tools and opened up a path. At this time, the cry of a baby suddenly rang out in front. This situation was rather strange. The old couple looked at each other, burning with anxiety. They quickened their pace. They hurried through the burnt sorghum, and the old man missed. The old woman reacted quickly and grabbed his arm, preventing him from falling into the scorched pit. The flames in the sinkhole had not been completely extinguished. In the middle of the sinkhole was half a broken eggshell, and there was a baby lying inside. His body was wrinkled and pink. He clenched his fists and kicked his legs, as if he was fighting with an invisible monster. He was crying loudly. The old man slowly slid down the sinkhole, extinguished the remaining fire, and approached the baby. The baby suddenly opened his eyes and stopped crying. A pair of big red eyes clearly reflected the surrounding scenery. The old man stopped in his tracks, not daring to approach. The old woman walked past him and picked up the baby. Her face was full of excitement. "Old man, look, it's a baby. It's a gift from His Majesty." Before they came to this nirvana, they ate vegetarian, prayed to the Buddha, and did good deeds all their lives. However, they didn't have any children. They were the typical local example of good people don't get rewarded. They didn't have any regrets. They were pious and did good deeds as usual. After they died, they were led to this nirvana. However, they didn't stop thinking about it. Today, their dream finally came true. When the old man heard this, he no longer hesitated. He immediately knelt down and chanted the name of Buddha. They carried the child back to the house and fed him rice porridge. The child did not refuse and ate more than an adult. The old woman beamed with joy. Oh, luckily we are in His Majesty's territory. Otherwise, we would all be poor because of him. The old man slapped his thigh. All right, I'll go and plant more pumpkins. We can harvest them in a few days and feed the kid pumpkin soup. The pure land of ultimate bliss had the saying, flowers that don't wither in all 4 seasons, and the scenery of spring in all 8 seasons. The climate was warm and comfortable, and there was no severe cold or heat. The land was exceptionally fertile, and there was no need for labor. Farming was no longer a hard job of facing the yellow soil with one's back to the sky. It had become a great joy. They could plant whatever they wanted to eat. Today it was planted and the next day it would sprout. It was different every day. Soon it would blossom and bear fruit. It was an indescribable joy. The fields were always filled with the fragrance of flowers. The child was growing up day by day. Yes, the child was growing up every day, every moment. The next day he could run all over the place and eat more and more. A few days later, the newly planted pumpkin patch could no longer satisfy his appetite. The old couple did not find it strange. Presumably, in this nirvana, children grew as fast as melons and fruits. One day, the child was eating melons. Suddenly, a light flashed through his mind. He looked up from the melon's skin. Who am I? This caught the old couple off guard. These days, they had discussed the naming of the child. For the child given by His Majesty, the name must be careful and meaningful. They could not just call him Ergu or Daju. However, they were not educated. The children in the village in the previous generation all had such names. The old man smoked 3 packs of tobacco but still could not find a name. He exhaled a mouthful of smoke. Hey, old woman, why didn't His Majesty give him a name as well? The old woman pointed at the old man's head and said resentfully, You old thing, you really think you have too little gold. I can't count on you. I'll go to the temple and ask for one in a few days. However, after a few days, the child asked himself. The old couple looked at each other and were speechless. Who am I? The child threw away the melon skin. His voice became louder. I got it. The old man slapped his thigh again. You were born from an egg. Let's call you Egxing. The old woman glared at the old man. The old man did not feel it at all. He said proudly, My surname is Ruan. You will be called Ruan Egxing. The old woman snatched the tobacco pipe and hit him on the head. You are the soft egg. You are the soft egg. The old man parried and said, I am not a soft egg. How can I be hit by you? The child muttered to himself, Egxing? My name is Egxing. He automatically ignored the word Ruan. Suddenly, he smiled and jumped up. I am Egxing. I still want to eat melons. The melons are all gone. Go and plant them. The old man picked up the melon seeds on the ground and carried the hoe. He walked out of the door dejectedly. Egxing followed behind him, waiting to eat melons. The old man laughed. Egxing, don't be anxious. It won't grow in 10 days to half a month. Egxing did not give up and continued to follow. The old man patted his head and went to the field to plant the melon seeds. Egxing squatted on the ridge of the field and waited. His eyes were fixed on the melon field. What a silly child. The old man smiled and shook his head. Suddenly he heard Egxing mumble. Grow, grow, grow. A pair of scarlet eyes gradually turned green. They were as clear as water and as green as leaves. The melon sprouts broke out of the soil and grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bright yellow flowers bloomed and round fruits grew under the petals. They swelled up like balloons. In the next moment, the melon was ripe and fell. Egxing rushed into the melon field and picked up a watermelon that was bigger than his head. He smashed it with his head and started eating. Chapter 1577. The watermelon was extremely sweet. Perhaps because it was born in this paradise, the juice was filled with joy. He could not help but chuckle as he ate. It was as if he had never felt so relaxed and joyful in his life. Suddenly he felt his face warm and wet. He wiped it and licked it, but it was salty and bitter. What is this? He blinked his eyes. His green eyes were like the mouth of a spring. The salty and bitter liquid on his face increased, unable to be stopped. Perhaps because he was not born in this paradise and was soaked in pain, he could only produce this bitter liquid. His chest felt heavy, as if something was on the verge of bursting out. His small face scrunched up as he let out a low growl that seemed human yet inhuman. Rings of green light surged out. The plants grew madly, tangling with each other and killing each other. He was like an ostrich, burying his head into the melon skin. After a long time, it finally calmed down. The plants had all withered. He raised his head slowly, revealing an innocent smile again. His green eyes were no longer scarlet. The old couple were shocked, unsure of what had happened. The man called Li Qingshan had used the phoenix's nerva, when he was at his weakest, to seal everything with the spirit turtle, preventing his cultivation from regressing. He was like a turtle withdrawing its head into its shell to avoid the invasion of the outside world. However, he knew very well that this was only a temporary measure. The spirit turtle was good at defending, but not only was this fragile defense being corroded by the paradise, it was also being questioned by himself. He would eventually ask, "Who am I?" And just now, the Qilin transformation that had stagnated for so long had actually advanced a level without him realizing it. Perhaps this world was suitable for the cultivation of the Qilin transformation, or perhaps he had unintentionally agreed with the principle of letting nature take its course. Anyway, his cultivation did not decline, but instead increased, tearing a crack in the fragile turtle shell. Those memories filled with blood, slaughter, pain, and despair, even if it was just a sliver, were already not something the current egg could endure. Compared to the ease and joy he felt right now, the words beyond the 9 heavens were far too heavy and vague. The sealed memories would eventually recover. At that time, would he still be willing to endure the pain? In the blink of an eye, Eggshing was already 1 month old. The old couple invited all the families within a radius of 10 miles and held a banquet in a wheat field. Of course, the Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss abided by all the Buddhist precepts. Alcohol, meat, and fish were not to be touched. What they drank was only tea and fruit juice. However, as the saying goes, it's not the tea that intoxicates you, but the tea that intoxicates you. Amidst the rich fragrance of the flowers, under the warm blazing sun, everyone's faces were suffused with a red glow, and their laughter did not stop for a single moment. In the middle of the threshing field was a square table with a rattan chair on it. The main character of this gathering, Eggshing, was sitting high on the rattan chair to ensure that everyone could see him. He looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. He wore a tiger head hat and tiger head shoes, and a silver safety lock hung around his neck. However, he was the only one who wasn't smiling. His eyes were half closed and he was dozing off. The cracks continued to expand, and the memories of the past continuously seeped in, turning into nightmares. Sometimes he would dream of being forced to work, being exposed to the scorching sun, his whole body aching. Sometimes he would dream of carrying a corpse and climbing an iceberg with difficulty. The most terrifying were those dreams where he was being hunted. The enemies were all different. There was an ugly and malicious old woman, a cold and confident swordsman, and a ferocious black dragon. Every time he was forced into a desperate situation, he would wake up from the nightmare. Thus, he tried his best to stay awake, and only took a short nap when he couldn't take it anymore. Fortunately, when he was awake, he was still relatively happy, and he also liked this kind of liveliness. The threshing field was full of joy. Even though he could be seen just by raising his head, he was still surrounded by people. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside, and all of them were clicking their tongues in wonder. Among the various Buddhist precepts, the prohibition of lust was far more serious than the prohibition of alcohol. However, eating, drinking, and sex are the great desires of man, and it was very difficult to overcome. But in this pure land of ultimate bliss, it was not a problem at all. Everyone had no desire for lust, even husband and wife could not do it, so it was rare for newborns to be born. If it was in an ordinary world, to grow this big in a month, one would probably be treated as a monster. But in this pure land of ultimate bliss, no one thought so. Everyone's heart was filled with kindness, and they were sincerely happy for the old couple. They looked at Egshing as if they were looking at their own children. Egshing was infected by this atmosphere, and he could not help but smile. Egshing, show them what you've got. Old man Ruan shouted. Okay. King responded and jumped up, somersaulted, and firmly stepped on the back of the chair. He put on a posture of golden rooster standing on one leg, and shouted, Grow! 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 Clusters of wheat sprouts broke through the soil, and in the blink of an eye, the threshing field became a golden wheat field. Amidst the exclamations, someone said, It's amazing! As expected of the child bestowed by Buddha. Brother Ruan, you should go to the temple to fulfill your vows. Old man Ruan touched his head. This? I haven't had the time. There's no time like the present. Let's go now. Everyone, let's go together. The crowd cheered loudly, lifted the table as if carrying a palanquin, and walked majestically to the temple. This side of the world was full of temples. In less than 2 hours, they arrived in front of a solemn, simple, and ancient temple. The reception monk welcomed them into the temple and invited the abbot. Everyone talked at once, and the abbot was also surprised and a little suspicious. Unlike these ordinary people, who only knew how to recite Buddhist scriptures, he was a serious Buddhist. Even Guanyin sending children was a common saying, let alone Buddha sending children. Therefore he used heavenly eye to take a closer look at Egshing, and could not help but be surprised. He quickly lifted his kasaya and bowed deeply to Egshing. Amitba, I didn't know it was Divine General Jialon. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. What he saw was no longer a child, but a golden, tall, and majestic god. No matter how suitable the pure land of ultimate bliss was for Buddhists to cultivate, it was still rare for one to survive 6 heavenly tribulations. Divine General Jialon was already a righteous Buddhist god. Although his official position was not high, he had entered the ranks of gods and could be worshipped by believers. Even if he was reborn and his memories were sealed, his godhood would still exist. In the pure land of ultimate bliss, monks had an extremely high status. Hearing that it was Divine General Jialon, everyone hurriedly bowed down. Even the old couple did not dare to not bow. Egshing jumped into the crowd and helped them up. He widened his eyes and questioned the abbot. You baldy, why are you talking about blue and green? Get up, don't bow to me. The abbot was shocked. Could it be that this divine general was unwilling to reveal his identity? At this moment, a magnificent voice came from outside the temple. Amitba. Long time no see, General Li. A monk holding a monk's staff, wearing a bamboo hat, and an old kasaya walked into the temple. Egshing felt inexplicably anxious. Who are you? You also call me a general? What General Li? Why not General Watermelon? Chapter 1578. The abbot had just gotten up and glanced outside the temple gate. He almost fell to the ground again. Amitba, what's going on today? Another one is here. It turned out that the monk who called himself Rangoon outside the gate looked inconspicuous, but under the observation of the heavenly eye, he was clearly a divine monk who had attained anagami and was only 1 step away from arhat. In terms of status in Buddhism, he was even higher than the divine general Sangha. Even in this pure land of ultimate bliss, it was very rare. General, you're really forgetful. You've forgotten about me so quickly. Abbot Rangoon slightly lifted his bamboo hat, revealing a young and handsome face. Even if Li Qingshan's memory wasn't sealed, he might not recognize him. In the Battle of Black Cloud City, he sacrificed himself to attract the light of guidance, severely injuring the incarnation of the demon god, and winning precious time for Li Qingshan. And he was originally an eminent monk of the Pure Land school, so this pure land of ultimate bliss was the most suitable place for cultivation. He had successfully rebuilt his golden body, and his cultivation had reached the next level. He had already gone through 6 heavenly tribulations. I'm not a general and I don't know you. Egg put his hands on his waist, puffed out his chest, and said arrogantly. But in his heart he was panicking. This monk was really familiar. He had probably seen him in one of his nightmares. That was almost one of his worst dreams. He fought on a bloody battlefield, and countless people died tragically. The enemy was so strong that it made people despair. He originally thought that as long as he stayed awake, he could stay away from those nightmares. You don't know me, but I know you. Stinky monk. Damn bald donkey. Go away, I don't want to see you. Egg waved his hand angrily, and huge trees rose from the ground, isolating Abbot Rangoon outside the gate. Everyone was shocked. This was the pure land of ultimate bliss of Amitabha. This was simply scolding a bald person in front of a monk. You don't want to see me, but I have to see you. Abbot Rangoon didn't need to use the heavenly eye to see that the tall and mighty, divine General Sangha looked exactly like Li Qingshan. He walked into the temple, and all the huge trees automatically parted to make a path for him. Step by step, he walked in front of Egshing and observed his expression. He vaguely guessed that there was something wrong with his memory. Egshing clenched his teeth and stared at Yangon like an enraged little beast. He had never met such a powerful person in his life, except in his nightmares. It was a nightmare that had come true. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, Abbot Yangon suddenly bowed deeply. I have an important request. In the entire Elysium, there was probably only one person who could do this. This was related to the White Bone Bodhisattva, and even more related to the path and future of the entire Pure Land sect. He had always been brooding over it. Not only could his cultivation not improve, but it also gradually regressed. It wasn't until he arrived at the Pure Land of ultimate bliss that he felt slightly relieved. After attaining the Anagami fruit, he couldn't help but start searching for the answer. How did that person degenerate into a white bone bodhisattva? Egshing was taken aback. This was not the same as his usual nightmare. Get up. Are you so sure that I'm that general? Abbot Yangon raised his head and looked past Egg into the magnificent and majestic Mahavira Hall. Amidst the green smoke, the golden Buddha's eyes were half closed, and the corners of his lips were slightly raised, as if he was smiling. Namo Amitabha, if I'm looking for a secret that I shouldn't know, please use your divine light to stop me. He held his breath, as if waiting for the judgment to come, but nothing happened. So he said, follow me, you'll know at a glance. The layout of this temple was very large. It had everything, such as the Heavenly King Hall and the Arhat Hall, worshipping all kinds of gods and Buddhas. And as the guardian deity of the monastery, the Sangharama Hall naturally couldn't be lacking. Although it was only a side hall, the courtyard was majestic, solemn, and spotless. Other than the Sangharama gods sitting in the center, there were dozens of Sangharama gods lined up on both sides. Each of them was lifelike and majestic. At the very end, there was a brand new statue. It had red hair and red eyes. It held its head high and was in high spirits. The nameplate beside it was engraved with 3 big words, Li Qingshan. Now in the entire Elysium, there was such a statue in all the temples that worshipped the Sangharama god. That was why Abbot Yangon knew of his arrival and specially came to find him. Li Qinghan. Egshing looked at the statue in a daze. The cracks on the seal expanded rapidly. Countless memory fragments flashed. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he couldn't deny that it was him. He had seen this face many times in his nightmares, in the shadows of swords and sabers, and in the eyes of his enemies that were filled with killing intent. However, unlike him, that man seemed to be fearless. That was exactly what he wanted to be. Egshing suddenly looked back. If I was Li Qingshan, what do you want me to do? It's not convenient to talk about it here. You have to follow me to a place. You will know when the time comes. Egshing almost agreed immediately. He had a feeling that as long as he followed this monk, he could become Li Qingshan and completely get rid of those damned nightmares. He opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly saw the old couple outside the Sangharama temple. They were looking at him eagerly, hesitating and not daring to enter. Thus, he lowered his head and no longer looked at the statue. I can't go with you. I want to go home. He clearly remembered that every time he woke up from a nightmare, they would always accompany him. There was no exception. Abbot Yangon was a little surprised and fell into deep thought. The night was dark and the bright moon hung high in the sky. In the melon field, Egshing sat on a big watermelon the size of a calf. He stared at the bright moon without the slightest hint of tiredness. He repeatedly recalled the experience during the day, especially the statue of Li Qingshan. Is that my original appearance? At this moment he heard a rustling sound. The old couple walked along the ridge of the field one after the other. He waved his hand impatiently. Grandpa, Grandma, I'm going to sleep now. Don't keep rushing me. The old couple looked at each other. Kid, you go. Egshing was shocked. Where am I going? To find that master. Sai, seeing you have nightmares every night, we feel terrible. I thought you were possessed and even begged Buddha to protect you. I didn't expect you to be one of Buddha's generals. Buddha probably doesn't want to see you slacking off and not working. We begged Buddha, but we might end up harming you instead. Sai, Buddha has so many generals. Why can't he let you go? The old couple nagged. Egshing felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He pursed his lips but couldn't say a word. He jumped down from the big watermelon, bowed deeply to them, and ran away with large strides. The moonlight was as bright as day, elongating his shadow. Abbot Yangon stood alone in front of the temple, waiting. He looked a little compassionate. Wasn't this the paradise he had always yearned for? What else was there to ask? Chapter 1579. At this moment, Abbot Yangon saw a small figure dashing towards him from the grassy plain under the silvery moonlight. He murmured, What are you asking again? Egshing stood still in front of the temple gate and took a deep breath with his hands on his knees. He said resolutely, Let's go. If his life was fated to be filled with nightmares, then he would continue fighting like Li Qingshan. He would not hide away like a coward, too afraid to sleep. Wait! Egshing barged into the temple again, and the monks exclaimed in surprise. He then walked out while clapping his hands in satisfaction. In the Sangharama hall, the divine general called Li Qingshan, who sat at the very end, had been smashed to a pulp. He no longer possessed his awe-inspiring bearing. Why? Abbot Yangon was also surprised. Becoming a god and being worshipped was probably something all cultivators hoped for. Was it because his position was too low? I don't want anyone to worship me. Amitba, do you only want to be equal to all living beings? I am ashamed. Abbot Yangon put his palms together and sighed with a smile, but only you can do this. What is it? Don't worry, we will talk as we go. Then they walked into the silvery blue night and disappeared into the vast plain. In the messy Sangharama temple, all the monks felt weak all over. In the pure land of ultimate bliss, not to mention the statues worshipped in the temples, no one even dared to damage a piece of paper with a painting of a god on it. They had never heard of such a horrifying and rebellious thing, and they did not know what to do. In the tall and deep divine hall, the Sangharama god and a group of divine generals seemed to be staring at them. The monks knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly, confessing their sins. The abbot was the calmest. He ordered, Quickly clean up this place, then go to Master Zhu's carpenter shop and hire another one. No one is allowed to leak anything about this. He went to the corner and held up the remaining half of the head of the divine general Li Qingshan. With his buttocks facing the sky, he bowed deeply. I have failed to protect you well. Please forgive me. I will rebuild your Dharmakaya as soon as possible. The next morning, the Sangharama temple was swept clean again. A brand new statue stood high on the altar. The bright and beautiful sunlight fell on him, making him look even more spirited. From time to time, the monks would come over to take a look and pay their respects to confirm the existence of this statue. What happened last night was like a nightmare. At the same time, Egg-sun felt that Abbot Yangon had no ill intentions, so he told him about his encounter. You have indeed lost your memories. Did I hit my head? Egg-boy touched his head with both hands, but he didn't find even a big bump. Of course not. Abbot Yangon could vaguely guess that Li Qingshan had deliberately sealed his memories to resist the influence of the pure land of ultimate bliss. Based on his understanding of this kid, he was absolutely capable of doing such a thing. Then how do I recover? Well, that's easy. Abbot Yangon smiled. His young and handsome face had a hint of ill intentions. He even patted Exon's shoulder. No need to thank me. I asked you to do something, so you should repay me. Thus, he turned around and slightly deviated from the direction. He passed through a dense forest where there were no wild beasts. He crossed a large river where there were no fish. He climbed up a large mountain where there were only bird cries that never stopped. It was a wonderful melody that seemed to be singing the praises of this wonderful world. Sometimes, flocks of birds would fly, gather, and disperse, and the sound of flapping wings would resound through the sky. It was like a paradise for birds, and they couldn't help but stop to admire it. Climbing to the peak of the mountain and looking down at the entire plain, Exon's eyes were wide open. He saw countless buildings at the foot of the mountain. There were houses, towers, canals, palaces, fountains, temples, and plazas. It stretched to the end of the horizon, and it was unknown how many hundreds of miles it was. Even in his previous life, he had never seen such a big city. The clear river flowed down from the mountain, passing through the entire city and spreading to every corner through the canals. They followed the river, and the city was also filled with the sounds of birds and the fragrance of flowers. There were people coming and going everywhere, but they weren't idle. Similarly, there were peddlers and craftsmen who sold their wares. However, there was no worry on their faces. The peddlers weren't worried that their goods wouldn't be sold or that they wouldn't be able to get a good price. They didn't have any schemes, and they enthusiastically shared their goods with the passers-by. Their peddling was more like a singing competition among birds, and it became a street scene. The craftsmen were fully focused on their own work, but they didn't live on it. Instead, they lived on a passion that came from the bottom of their hearts. Any one of them would be an extraordinary master in the mortal world. And the handicrafts that came from their hands were all exquisite and peerless. In the ordinary world, they would definitely be priceless. Now, they were only placed by the roadside for passers-by to judge and choose. And the things used for trading were not gold, silver, copper, and iron, but Bodhi seeds. In this world, Bodhi trees were everywhere, and Bodhi seeds were not valuable. However, no one had any greedy or evil thoughts in their hearts. Bodhi seeds were just a kind of token, and everyone did their job and took what they needed. If you asked them to do nothing, they would feel that it was meaningless. Along the way, Egg Sheng's mouth was not empty, and he carried a lot of food and drink in his arms. Although he didn't have half a Bodhi seed in his hands, with Abbot Yangon beside him, the bystanders thought that he was a young monk who followed their master to travel, and they fought to stuff things into his arms. This place is really... He gulped and swallowed everything in his mouth. A good place. The chef's skills were simply excellent. There were crystal-clear sweet potato glutinous rice and black sesame pancakes, burnt yellow 1000-page tofu, sweet and fragrant corn soup, and there were countless of them. Up until now, there hadn't been a repeat, and it simply made his appetite increase. My Buddha is merciful, and all living beings suffer. It would be great if the boundless world could be like this. Abbot Yangon sighed from the bottom of his heart, and he had infinite yearning. When that time comes, there won't be anything left for you. Monks can all renounce asceticism and go home. Abbot Yangon said, when that time comes, there won't be a need for monks, and perhaps even Buddha won't be needed. Egg Sheng was stunned for a moment, and in this moment of distraction, an old lady raised her head and puffed out her chest, and walked towards him as if she was flying. She didn't notice him, and they suddenly collided. Although he was small in stature, his strength was great, and he didn't even sway. The old lady cried out in pain and fell heavily to the ground. He hurriedly went to help the old lady, but she suddenly grabbed his wrist tightly. He panicked in his heart, and he didn't know why he was panicking, but he had a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The old lady said, "Child, are you all right?" She touched him from head to toe. "Grandma didn't injure you, right?" No. Amit Ba, Buddha bless me, it's good that you're all right. It's good that you're all right. The old lady got up and stuffed a handful of Bodhi seeds into his hands. Take it and buy some candy. She then walked away as if she was flying. Chapter 1580. Reeks. In a daze, he seemed to remember a world where one could never help an old lady fall to the ground. It was best not to even get close to her. Who would have thought that in this Elysium, he would be able to get money after knocking down an old lady? Compared to that, this world was indeed better. Not only that, the onlookers were also concerned. Child, are you all right? That auntie was not careful when she walked. Look at how she knocked someone's child. Sigh, I have not seen such a small child for many years. How pitiful. Not only were the spectators not cold, but they were also very warm. It was as if they could melt a person. I felt guilty and quickly confessed, it wasn't her who knocked me, it was me who knocked her. The crowd liked him even more. What a good child, speaking up for others even after being knocked down. That's right, that's right. Come, child, go buy some pancakes. He was soon drowned in the Bodhi seeds. I don't want it, I don't want anything. It was not easy for him to walk away from the enthusiastic onlookers. Rare, really rare, a sparrow trampling an old hen to death, an ant 3 feet long, an old grandpa sitting in a cradle. He shook his head and hummed a song, following Abbot Yangon through the surging crowd. Unfortunately, there were no other children on the street, and no one came to sing with him. Suddenly, Abbot Yangon stopped. Let's stay here for the night. This was neither a monastery nor an inn, but a large square. At this time, the sun was setting and the lanterns were lit. The square was bustling with noise and excitement. Many people were lined up, singing and dancing. No matter how one looked at it, it was not a place to stay. Yes, this is the place. All right. Egshing held his cheeks and sat down on the steps, looking at the dancing crowd. The setting sun dyed his face as red as an apple, and he unconsciously smiled. He looked no different from an ordinary child. Abbot Yangon suddenly felt a trace of pity. Perhaps he should not have gotten him involved. Perhaps not only should he not have helped him recover his memory, but he should have helped him completely seal the past. The heroic determination that belonged to Li Qingshan was backed by mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and boundless sins. He was not willing to be like an ordinary cultivator, treating all living beings as ants. If that was the case, he would never be able to feel at ease and would have to bear this sin. Thus, he became even more resolute. Even if he were to die in battle somewhere, he would take it as a matter of course. Now that he recalled what he said in the Pure Land Temple in Black Cloud City, it was still deafening and to the point. I'm laughing at how weak all of you are. You're no different from those fellows who view all life as ants. Because they couldn't bear the pain in their hearts, they had to abandon their good thoughts and lay down the butcher's knife. Both are distorting their hearts, but what's the difference? The heart is compassionate, and the heart is evil. Carrying a butcher's knife in hand, killing strong enemies outside, isn't that a pleasure? Why go to the pure land of ultimate bliss? Those who kill will always be killed. Since I killed, I was prepared to be killed. I don't seek bliss, I don't seek longevity. How can a monk measure it? It wasn't as profound as the Buddhist scriptures, but this great determination and willpower was simply incredible. At this moment, Egshing suddenly jumped up. I'm going to dance. Those dancers kept teasing him, and in just a short while, he had already learned most of the dance moves. Finally, he could not hold it in any longer and jumped onto the stage. Like a pail of cold water poured into a pot of hot oil, the atmosphere in the square immediately became as enthusiastic as fire. A figure flashed in front of him. It was the old lady who bumped into him. Her figure was abnormally vigorous, and she was constantly spinning in circles. Kid, you came, let's compete. Let's compete, who's afraid of who? I Jiangsu. I Li Egshing. One old and one young danced in the middle of the square. Everyone surrounded them, cheering and cheering, but the dance didn't stop. Zhang Su had been immersed in this path for many years, visited countless dance masters, stepped on countless squares, and mastered this dance skill. It was so exciting that people completely forgot her age and were immersed in her dance. However, she was soon astonished and shocked. It was as if this child knew how to dance since birth. Every movement he made was as smooth as flowing water, perfect and flawless. How was this a child? He was clearly a dance master. Soon, she couldn't keep up with his dance steps and was convinced of her defeat. Egsheng was in high spirits and defeated the dancers one by one. Cheers surged like waves, and the air was so hot that it seemed like it was about to burn. He danced without restraint, like a storm, like a whirlwind, like a frog in a flurry, like a fighting tiger. It wasn't just the moves he had just learned, but also the Yanko dance, peacock dance, Latin dance, tap dance, and street dance that originated from the past. He became the one and only leader of the dancers, and everyone followed his steps. Abbot Yangon shook his head and smiled bitterly. Forget it, a mere Yangon. What qualifications does he have to help Li Qingshan choose his path? Egsheng's eyes were half closed, and he forgot everything around him, as if he had fallen into a dream. He felt great joy in his heart, and he couldn't express it without dancing. He also felt great anger, and he couldn't vent it without dancing. He also felt great sorrow, and he couldn't calm down without dancing. Every emotion turned into an action, and it even radiated outside the square, inspiring everyone to do the same action. When the bell rang, a group of armored guards with weapons in their hands approached the plaza. It's getting late, everyone should disperse. Usually, everyone would disperse when they heard the bell, but today, no one cared about the guards' urging. Instead, more and more people came from all directions. The guards passed through the crowd and rushed into the center of the square, trying to stop the lead dancer. However, he still danced to his heart's content. Suddenly, a third eye opened on his forehead, shooting out burning divine flames that surrounded his body, preventing the guards from approaching. A statue of a god appeared on his body, wearing a flaming crown on his head, holding a small drum and flames in his hands. He was also dancing, but his movements were extremely slow and full of power. He slowly raised his left leg, and his right foot stepped on a flaming halo. His forearms gently stretched out. There was a series of clanging sounds, and even the guards threw away their weapons and danced with him. Their expressions were intoxicated, and they forgot their duties. Demonic dance. Abbot Yangon frowned, and it was a little unexpected. He had almost forgotten that Li Qingshan cultivated the Tao of Great Freedom, and now he was displaying the king dance form of the Great Freedom Heaven. There was clearly a trace of divinity in it, and even he couldn't stop it. The flaming halo rotated endlessly, and it symbolized the reincarnation of creation, preservation, and destruction. No one could escape such reincarnation, just like the people in the square at this moment. Even those who never knew how to dance started to dance enthusiastically, and they instantly became dance masters, but they were somewhat like marionettes. Unconsciously, he turned the square into his training field, and everyone into his believers. His primordial spirit's cultivation level increased rapidly. The night grew darker, and all the lights in the city were extinguished, leaving only this square. The bell struck 12, giving the final warning. Chapter 1581. A ferocious beast's roar broke the song and dance. A ferocious beast that looked like a bear appeared out of nowhere. Its entire body was in a terrible state with bone spikes protruding out of its skin. It emitted a dense demonic aura that covered the moonlight and cast a fishy shadow. The beast frantically turned its head, and its viscous saliva dripped onto the ground, immediately corroding a large pit. The commotion in the plaza attracted its attention. Its eyes were filled with a crazed and bloodthirsty light as it pounced forward with its 4 claws. A fishy wind blew against Exen's face, and he was startled awake from the demonic dance. He immediately saw the hideous beast, and everyone had just stopped dancing. They were still in a trance and had yet to fully wake up. At this crucial moment, Abbot Yangon was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were wide open, and his heart was beating rapidly. This was truly a nightmare coming true. If this beast charged into the plaza, countless people would die. He clenched his teeth and charged towards the demon emperor beast. At the moment when they were about to collide, he suddenly realized that his heart was beating like a drum, not because of fear, but because of an uncontrollable impulse. He suddenly understood. So the reason why this nightmare is so terrifying is because I have been running all this time. The beast slapped over with its paw, and the air was oppressive and cracked, making him unable to breathe. Right at this moment, there was a cracking sound as if a glacier had cracked, and water gushed out from the crack. Countless memories surged over, and he couldn't distinguish them in time. He was stunned for a moment. Boom! The ground split apart, and a large pit was formed. He was slapped to the ground by the bear paw. Everyone was completely awake now, and they screamed and ran in panic. The guards quickly looked for the weapons that were thrown away, but it was too late. A shadow quickly shrouded over, and everyone looked up with shock. A giant beast was descending from the sky, and with this pressure, countless people would die. At this crucial moment, a voice shouted, "Chung! Chung! Chung!" Although it was a young child's voice, it clearly had the smell of iron and blood. In an instant, countless brambles pierced through the sky, and like dancing snakes, they pierced through the beast and tightly bound it in midair. Eggsun walked out of the pit step by step. His long hair fluttered without any wind, and his pair of green eyes stared at the beast, glowing with a terrifying radiance. He looked like a beast. In an alley on the side of the square, Abbot Yangon quietly heaved a sigh of relief and put down the staff in his hand. Under the silver moon, the demonic beasts howled mournfully and struggled with all their might. Demonic blood rained down, staining everyone's bodies. Their expressions immediately changed. A man was running out of the square. The person in front of him was a little slower and was immediately pushed aside by him. The person behind him directly stepped over the body of the fallen man without the slightest bit of mercy or modesty. Dan Sheng's pair of green eyes faintly revealed a scarlet color. He lowered his thick brows and clenched his fingers. Die! Even more thorns broke out of the ground and swam through the demon emperor beast's body, tearing apart every inch of its flesh. However, this demon emperor beast's vitality was abnormally strong, and it was still struggling. Eching snorted coldly and once again charged at the demonic beast. With a flaming halo wrapped around him, he pierced through the demonic beast's huge body and dug out a huge demon heart. The magical beast immediately stopped struggling, and its eyes gradually lost their luster. Eggsun stood on the head of the demonic beast and raised the demonic heart in his hand. Everyone had escaped a calamity, and they all stood still and cheered loudly. However, there was an unusual fanaticism. In the blink of an eye, the singing and dancing plaza had turned into a primitive and bloody hunting ground. The tribesmen offered their most valiant warriors the highest reverence. Everyone had forgotten that the first commandment of Buddhism was not to kill. Eggsun smiled proudly and looked up. There were traces of demonic beasts everywhere in the city. The armored guards were holding weapons and fighting with the demonic beasts. Although these demonic beasts were crazy and bloodthirsty, most of them were not strong. Furthermore, the guards were already prepared and had great teamwork. They easily suppressed them, and killing them was only a matter of time. Other than this square, most of the residents were hiding in their houses and were not affected. Thus, he did not make another move and slowly descended from the sky. The crowd surged forward and lifted him up with their hands, throwing him into the sky again and again as they shouted, "Long live!" From the corner of his eyes, he saw Abbot Yangon's figure and nodded slightly to him. In any case, this method was indeed useful. He had recovered more than half of his memories, and it would take at most 3 to 5 days for him to fully recover. However, he felt inexplicably uneasy, as if something was wrong. However, he did not have the time to put the memory fragments together and could not figure out what the problem was. The demonic beast's howls quickly subsided, but the people in the square, perhaps because they were stained with demonic blood, were controlled by an unusual emotion. They surrounded the corpse of the demonic beast and started dancing again. This time, the dance was very unusual. The men were pushing and shoving, and the women were arguing with each other. The smell of gunpowder was very intense. And some men and women simply hugged each other and touched each other, starting an open party. Because there were more men than women, the distribution was uneven, causing more fights and chaos. Although Eggsun, was still young, he still became the target of the women. He had no choice but to jump onto the demonic beast's corpse to avoid these crazy women. The guards were attracted by the commotion here. Seeing this scene, they were all dumbfounded and did not know what to do. Abbot Yangon also shook his head and put his palms together. Amitba, I have sinned, I have sinned. If he had personally taken action, the demonic beast would have been eliminated as soon as it appeared, and these people would not have been stained by the demonic blood and broken so many commandments. However, compared to what he was going to do, this kind of sin was nothing. Egson could not help but laugh, feeling that it was extremely interesting. If this kind of party was held a few more times, in a few years, children would definitely run around the streets. Suddenly, a wave of sleepiness surged up, and he could not help but yawn, remembering that he had not slept for a long time. And the unceasing flow of memories made his head dizzy. He simply lay on the back of the demonic beast and fell asleep, no longer worrying about any nightmares. As for those powerful enemies in the dream, I should not be afraid of them, they should be afraid of me. The long night passed, and the red sun rose from the east. The first ray of sunlight shone on the square. Black mist rose from the demonic beast's corpse, and soon, the eerie white bones were revealed and quickly dissipated. Egson woke up, and after a dreamless night, he stretched his body. He had grown quite a bit, and already looked like a young man. The men and women in the square also woke up, and black mist rose from their naked bodies. They looked at each other and cried out in alarm. Egson chuckled and took out the demon heart, only to see that the demon heart was also melting, and after a while, it disappeared. The people in the square also ran away. Everything that happened last night gave people an extremely unreal feeling, as if it was a big dream. This was clearly the Elysium, so why were there demonic beasts? Abbot Yangon walked over. We should go out. Chapter 1582. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? Talk.net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Lan Tura is a Sanskrit sound that means giving without complaint. It means giving dharma, delivering all living beings from suffering, never satisfied. It is also known as the place where the lotus blossoms. The lotus symbolizes wisdom and Buddha nature in the Buddhist scriptures. When mortals reach this place, they will be enlightened and free from all worries. Because Buddha had once preached here, it also had a thunderous name, Big Lain Temple. The sound of Buddha preaching was as loud as thunder. It is the most magnificent, solemn, glorious, and sacred temple in the entire Pure Land of ultimate bliss, perhaps in all the heavens and realms. It is especially so for the monks of the Pure Land sect. It is not an exaggeration to give all the praises in the world to it. When Abbot Rangoon said this, he could not help but smile. Going to the great thunderclap temple of ultimate bliss to see Buddha is the dream of all the monks in the world. Egg's heart is drumming. As his memory gradually recovers, the name Great Thunderclap Temple sounds familiar no matter how he hears it. He always feels that it is not a good place to go. At this time, they have already passed through the city and are facing a mighty river. The water is turbulent and the waves are surging. At a glance, he can't see the other side. Even he feels that the situation is very dangerous. That abbot, I think I better not go. In any case, in a few days, his memory and power will be completely restored. At that time, he can plan his next step. But no matter where he goes, it is not worthwhile to run to Buddha. Abbot Yangon laughed. Oh, you are afraid? What a joke, what am I afraid of? Since you want to go to the great Thunderclap Temple, you can ask Buddha for help. His magic power is boundless and he can solve it with his little finger. Why bother me? By the way, psychological methods are useless against me. No, even Buddha couldn't do it. Only you can. Of course, if you really don't want to go, I can't force you. Abbot Yangon sighed. If I knew this, I wouldn't have wasted my effort last night and violated all the precepts. It is really unforgivable. Egsheng rolled his eyes. Okay, I'll go with you. In order to trick him into helping, this monk really said all sorts of nonsense. He even said, even Buddha can't do it, only you can do it. Even a ghost would not believe such words. All his life, he valued keeping his promises and repaying his debts. Even if there was a mountain of daggers or a sea of fire in front of him, he would still walk on it. Besides, since he had been conferred the title of Divine General Sangarama, it was not too much to pay a visit to the higher authorities. With a leap, he soared into the sky. With a splash, he fell into the water. Abbot Yangon stretched out his hand. Wait. As soon as Egshing flew above the river, he felt that the ground beneath him was empty. He had nothing to rely on. Not only did he fall into the river, no matter how hard he struggled, he still sank to the bottom of the river. Suddenly, his eyes flickered with a deep blue light. Only then did he stop sinking. He hurriedly swam out of the river and spat out several mouthfuls of water. He felt that his mouth was full of sand. Poo poo poo. What kind of river is this? Quicksand river. What flows within is the 3,000 week water. Even deities can't fly over it. They can only cross it. There is a saying, 800 quicksand realms, 3,000 weak water, goose seedlings can't float, reed flowers will sink to the bottom. To think that you can still swim up. Egshing spat fiercely again. Buddha's rules are too strict. Thinking about it, it made sense. Even ordinary cultivation sects didn't allow people to fly recklessly. However, he was still unhappy. Abbot Yangon raised his eyebrows. Kid, don't spout nonsense. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. I spat sand, it has nothing to do with Buddha. He covered his eyes with his hand and looked around for a while. Let's find a fairy. There is no fairy here. Abbot Yangon shook his head helplessly. Then what should we do? Don't worry, I have already made preparations. Abbot Yangon took out a slightly transparent tortoise shell and threw it into the weak water. It immediately became the size of a small boat and didn't sink. He climbed up first and turned his head. Come up. What is this? Egshing caressed the tortoise shell. Other than the natural patterns on it, there were also many mysterious and simple runes. There was a familiar aura coming from them. The shell of a spirit tortoise, it doesn't sink in water. I found one after much difficulty. I see. Egshing understood. He had the perfect bloodline of the spirit tortoise. That was why he could swim up from the river. He leapt up again. His eyes turned dark blue. He stood firmly on the water and laughed. What's so hard about it? He walked on the water and ran away. Abbot Yangon looked at his back. If I knew this, I wouldn't have looked for this tortoise shell. I could have just let this kid carry me over. Maybe he was destined to do this. Crossing 800 quicksand and 3,000 weak water to reach the other shore. Looking into the distance, the ends of the world were filled with clouds and mist. Above the clouds, there were undulating snowy mountains. The tallest mountain was shaped like a lotus. The sun was setting in the west. A red sun was hanging on the lotus. The sunset dyed the snowy mountains golden red. There were thousands of rays of light and thousands of auspicious colors. It was a magnificent scene. The lotus became more and more beautiful. As the light changed, it seemed to be blooming at all times. Egshing could not help but stop. That is, Spirited Mountain. Abbot Yangon's face was solemn. He took off his kasaya and monk robe and bowed deeply towards the Spirited Mountain. Stop pretending. Let's go. However, Abbot Yangon stood up. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and bowed again. You are. He suddenly understood that Abbot Yangon was bowing every 3 steps to the Spirited Mountain. Hey, you don't have to do this. If you do this, how long are we going to walk? Abbot Yangon did not say anything else. He bowed again and continued to walk forward. He ignored everything around him. In his eyes, there was only the blooming lotus and the glorious snowy mountains. Egshing grimaced and shook his head. You are really crazy. Their speed suddenly slowed down. They could only approach the Spirited Mountain step by step. At first, he mocked Abbot Yangon a few times. However, there was no response, so he was too lazy to say any more. Fortunately, there were strange flowers and plants everywhere. The scenery was beautiful, so he did not feel bored. Gradually, he felt a strange sense of respect. This kind of perseverance was indeed unusual. Moreover, he could actually resist his great taunt technique. It was really extraordinary. Thinking about it, Abbot Rangoon was not the kind of stubborn fanatic believer who followed blindly. The Buddha who was worthy of his worship must be really powerful and merciful. However, he was not willing to worship. It was not only because he did not want to lower his head. In his opinion, if Buddha really had great power and boundless power, he would not have the great mercy to save all living beings. If he really had the great mercy to save all living beings, he would not have the great power and boundless power. Otherwise, this world would have been a pure land of bliss. There would not have been a crazy woman like Qian Rongji. Probably, there would not have been a person like him. However, his speed was faster than he expected. As he got closer and closer to the spirited mountain, Abbot Yangon became more and more anxious. One's appearance was born from one's heart. His young and handsome face had also become unshaven and dusty. His expression was also confused and uneasy, as if he was repenting and atoning for his sins, but also as if he was struggling bitterly. Sometimes, Egshing had a premonition that the monk would say to him in the next second, "Let's go back." However, he did not say it out loud. He just kept walking and praying. Finally, they arrived at the spirited mountain. The magnificent pagoda and the blooming lotus were all right in front of them. At the end of the steps was a grand door, but the door was tightly shut. Abbot Yangon finally stood up and walked up the steps. Egshing did not dare to be negligent and followed closely behind. He also felt like he was looking at a holy land. However, it was quiet all around. There was no sound of bells, drums, or chanting. There was not even a ghost in sight. Ordinary monks could not come here, and bodhisattvas and arhats did not need to chant scriptures all day. When he arrived in front of the door, there were still no signs of it opening. Egshing went forward and banged on the door. "Open the door! Open the door!" "Where did the guard go?" "There's no need to knock. Look up." Abbot Yangon finally spoke. After this round of tempering, his eyes were even more resolute. Egshing looked through the crack of the door and saw a post in the middle of the door. There were 6 golden Sanskrit words written on it. Egshing clapped his hands. "It's over. It's all your fault for walking too slowly. Buddha went out to do something." Abbot Yangon did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you recognize those words?" "Of course." He counted with his fingers. "I have something not at home." "Exactly 6 words." Abbot Yangon laughed involuntarily. "I didn't expect you to be so proficient in mathematics. But who would stick a letter on the crack of the door?" The solemn atmosphere in his heart was diluted quite a bit. Egshing was unhappy. "What else do you think it is?" "Naturally, it's a seal with the 6 words Weng Ma and I hum me hum written on it." "What a joke! Who dares to seal the door of Buddha's house?" "Wait, could it be?" Chapter 1583. Egshing immediately understood what Abbot Yangon meant when he said, "Even Buddha can't do it. Only you can." Looking up at the golden post, a strong sense of déjà vu surged into his heart. He felt that he had heard of this situation somewhere before. But wait, this was a post written by Buddha. How could he, a mere Sangharama divine general, rashly go up and tear it down? Wouldn't that be like the god of longevity eating arsenic, tired of living? Abbot Yangon smiled slightly. "You don't have to worry, that is a damning mantra, a golden rule for me. To you, it's just a message that says I'm busy and not at home, so what's the harm in taking it down and looking at it?" However, Egg kept looking up, causing Abbot Yangon to ask curiously, "What are you looking at?" "I'm afraid that a palm technique will descend from the sky. Not only will it slap a traitorous child like you to death, you'll also implicate me. I've never heard of such a thing." Abbot Yangon let out a long sigh. "I'm definitely not a traitor. I'm just looking for an answer. If you're not willing, all right." Egg suddenly agreed. He felt that if Buddha wanted to stop Abbot Yangon, there was no need to wait until now. All he needed was a divine revelation, and this monk would definitely not be stubborn. So, probably, there wouldn't be any fatal danger. He floated into the air and came before the post, slowly reaching out to grab it. He couldn't help but hold his breath as his heart palpitated. This was an invitation left by the Gautama Buddha. Apart from the few great sages, all demons, devils, ghosts, and monsters had to avoid it. Who knew what kind of powerful magical powers and spells were contained in it? Maybe the Gautama Buddha didn't even need to do it himself. Whoever exposed it would die. However, he wouldn't be as conflicted as Abbot Yangon. His eyes flashed with determination as he grabbed the post and pulled it forcefully. The post floated down without any resistance. He opened his eyes wide and was on high alert. However, nothing happened. Looking at the post in his hand, it was as if it was really just the most ordinary post. At most, it was made of a more expensive material, made of gold, silk, and satin. At this moment, the door that had been sealed for who knows how many years slowly opened. There was not a single sound. All of a sudden, the bells and drums on the mountain rang out in unison. The sound was like thunder. Golden light radiated from the peak of the mountain, and the lotus seemed to be in full bloom. The light swept across the sky and illuminated the entire Elysium like an aurora. Everyone could see it when they raised their heads. The great Lane Temple, which had been sealed for a long time, was opened once again. A pair of red eyes suddenly opened on a lonely country in the sea, and the pupils shone with golden light. They're finally here. In an instant, Egg-Shing felt like he was being watched. When he turned around, there was nothing. Abbot Yangon stood in front of the great Lane Monastery in a daze. The magnificent and dignified palace pagodas seemed to echo with the voice of Buddha preaching. It was as if one could still hear the intense debate of the monks in the square. Under the guidance of the Buddha, everyone silently explored the deepest wisdom and passionately pursued the method of delivering all sentient beings from suffering. In the end, they formed the world-famous Mahayana Buddhism. That white-bone bodhisattva had once cultivated and studied here. In the end, with his great wisdom and compassion, he convinced all the monks and received the teachings of Buddha. He became the abbot of the great Lane Monastery and was placed with boundless expectations. Abbot Yangon was in a daze. Everything felt like a dream. But why did things turn out like this? What exactly went wrong? His chest rose and fell violently as he shouted in his heart. It took him a lot of effort to calm down. He had a feeling that the answer to all of this was in this great Lane Monastery. Egg-Shing wanted to say, "Did we cause too much of a commotion?" But since things had already come to this, there was nothing to be afraid of. He stuffed the invitation into his clothes and walked into the great Lane Monastery. How could he return empty-handed after entering a treasure mountain? Abbot Yangon went straight to the scripture depository. Egg-Shing had no interest in the scriptures. He had the 9 transformations of the demons and gods, so he didn't need any techniques. He strolled around the great Lane Monastery to see if he could bring back some souvenirs, such as relics. Little and should like it. But this was the pure land of ultimate bliss. Everyone was immortal, so why would relics be left behind? Thus, he strolled around but couldn't find anything worth stealing. Gold bricks? He wasn't a petty thief. Buddha statues? He didn't resell antiques. The spiritual energy in this mountain was extremely dense. It was like flowing liquid. Breathing in could cleanse one's marrow and meridians, changing one's tendons and forging one's bones. Even the 9 heavens couldn't compare. Ever since he entered the Great Lane Monastery, his whole body made cracking sounds and he felt extremely itchy. He grew up at a speed visible to the naked eye. He grew from a teenager to a handsome young man. His head also grew long. If I had 4th brother's ability, I would move this spiritual mountain away. Even if the earth vein is broken, the spiritual energy isn't this dense. I can use it to smash people. Unknowingly, he arrived at the peak of the mountain. The great Buddha's hall stood tall and majestic. There was a lotus pond in front of the hall. Lotus flowers bloomed in the pond. They were of different colors. There were white lotus, green lotus, red lotus, golden lotus, blue lotus. However, the red lotus was fragrant and the lotus leaves were wilted. It seemed a little decadent. However, there was a kind of tranquil Zen feeling that made people forget about the secular world. He took a deep breath. In an instant, the fragrance filled his lungs. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a cool breeze and rushed to the top of his head. In an instant, The gate that sealed his memories collapsed with a loud bang. All of his memories were completely restored and surged forth. He immediately recalled the reason for all of this. Damn it, I sealed my memories to prevent myself from being assimilated. Now that sealing them is useless, I have no other choice. I have to leave this pure land of bliss as soon as possible. However, the fragrance of the flowers still lingered in his lungs. It was still flowing out from the lotus pond and seeping into his body through every pore. His face was flushed red. He swayed as if he had drunk the best wine. Moreover, that little bit of worry was nothing compared to the relief and happiness in his heart. In the end, he plopped to the side of the pond and fell into a deep sleep. And in this completely unconscious situation, he breathed in and out the fragrance of the flowers. His Qilin transformation grew stronger and stronger before breaking through. His forehead swelled up high, giving birth to a pair of tall and straight antlers that flew diagonally behind him. His lion-like head was already covered in mane, and his lion-like body was covered in green scales. Behind him, an ox tail swayed back and forth. He had actually transformed into a legendary Qilin. Although he had not achieved great success, he could be considered to have achieved it. And with his breath, the wilted lotus flowers gradually grew taller and more nourished. The fragrance grew stronger. If he were awake, he would definitely discover one thing. The feeling of staying in this pure land of ultimate bliss was extremely similar to the feeling he had when he transformed into a spirit turtle and swam in the ultimate. That wonderful sense of belonging and recognition from the bottom of his heart did not need to be forced. His temperament was naturally compatible. Supplemented by dense and compatible spiritual qi, the increase of cultivation was as easy as eating and drinking. And he also encountered the same problem. His consciousness was assimilated by the world. Therefore, he was forced to sacrifice his memories in the ultimate and sealed them here. Chapter 1584. Qingshan, let's go. A heavy and tired voice urged. Is calling who? The Qilin woke up in a daze and shuddered violently. His eyes widened. I remember now. I'm Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan, Li Qingshan, Li Qingshan, mountain. When he woke up from his dream, the fragments of his memory fused together and everything became clear and bright. He took a deep breath under the majestic hall of great strength. The fragrance of flowers lingered and the lotuses bloomed even more enchanting. What surprised him was that not only had his strength recovered, but his cultivation level had also increased. The Qilin's longevity scheme had reached the 4th level and he had transformed into a Qilin for the first time. Yes, he had just noticed the changes in his body. This was unusual. Although the 4th level was not low, he still needed to concentrate to use the celestial and demon transformation. Especially the first time, how could he change without realizing it? With a clatter, it stood up and looked around. Where is this place? The Qilin was not very tall. Its shoulder height was about 3 meters, but its 4 hooves were in the air, its antlers were flying, its mane was dancing, and its green scales were shining. It had the majesty of a king among all beasts. Its eyes were like those of a fierce tiger, but they were gentle and indifferent, without sorrow or joy as it overlooked the world. Abbot Yangon looked up at it and was amazed. This legendary divine beast was extremely rare and was almost extinct. In the Western paradise, there were not even ordinary beasts, let alone a Qilin. Yes, this is the great Tempest Temple in the Western paradise. No, I have to leave now. With the recovery of his memories, it meant that the assimilation had begun. This time he could no longer resist it. The Qilin was about to soar into the sky when he saw the lotus pond. The flowers were blooming beautifully, green, purple, red, and white. They were clean but not enchanting, deeply attracting him. He walked to the lotus pond and leaned over a green lotus, taking a deep sniff. In the blink of an eye, the green lotus withered and fell. The azure glass-like petals fell into the quiet, deep water, stirring up a circle of ripples. As the green lotus withered, Spirited Mountain trembled slightly and the spiritual light quickly dissipated. Wait, this is... Abbot Yangon realized that the lotus pond was the core of the spirited mountain. Of course, this was just a metaphor. Everything on the spirited mountain was naturally formed, and there was no need to worry about the formation eye. Those lotuses were not ordinary lotuses, nor were they exotic plants. Instead, they were manifestations of laws. This was also a metaphor. The Buddha's metaphor corresponded to the phrase, where the lotus blossoms. However, since it was a law, how could Li Qingshan make it wither? 6 heavenly tribulations were only at the stage of chi refinement and essence soul refinement. They could see the existence of laws, but they could not truly come into contact with the laws. In addition, there were 3,000 grand daos, and all of them ran parallel to each other. Even a true god or true immortal who had tempered his spirit to return to the void would find it difficult to injure this lotus, much less a mere divine general Saran. Unless his cultivation path just so happened to coincide with the laws of this lotus, it would be difficult for him to harm it in the slightest. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, was completely immersed in the wonderful fragrance. After sniffing the green lotus, he went to sniff the red lotus. Stop! With a crash, Abbot Yangon glared angrily and waved his staff, striking down on the Qilin's back. At the critical moment, the staff stopped in midair. Abbot Yangon's veins were exposed, and he was panting like a bull, as if he was possessed. Suddenly, he turned his head and glared at the hall of great strength, shattering the green bricks with one step. What's the use of this Nalanda temple? What's the use of this pure land of ultimate bliss? Why don't we just destroy it? The deities and Buddhas in the hall were silent and swayed slightly. It was the spirited mountain beneath their feet that was trembling. The red lotus withered and smelled the white lotus. In the blink of an eye, the lotus flowers withered and the lotus leaves in the pond withered and turned yellow. Thus, the spiritual light dissipated and the spirited mountain shook violently. The magnificent pagoda's walls were peeling and filled with cracks. Even the red paint on the pillars and the gold leaf on the Buddha statues lost their luster. However, the plants grew wildly from the peak to the foot of the mountain. Wormwood grew through the cracks of the green bricks, vines climbed up the mottled walls, and trees broke through the houses of the main hall. In the blink of an eye, the pagoda was in ruins. Wormwood covered the ground and the ancient trees gave shade as if 1,000 years had passed. This glorious Great Lain temple seemed to have been sealed in the long river of time, remaining in a beautiful dream. As the seal was removed, the dream became reality, and it was immediately washed away by the river water until it was beyond recognition. With a clang, Abbot Yangon threw away the staff in his hand and knelt on the ground. He hugged his head and cried bitterly. His young and handsome face, just like the Great Lain temple, seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. Many wrinkles appeared at the corners of his lips and eyes, and every wrinkle contained an indescribable sorrow. A gust of cold wind blew, mixed with snowflakes. The warm spring weather no longer existed, and only then did one suddenly remember that this was the peak of a high mountain. It was cold at the top, and it was common for snowstorms to be bitterly cold. He finally found the answer and realized that he could not bear it. Li Qingshan seemed to have absorbed all the spiritual energy of the spirited mountain. His Qilin strategy of longevity advanced to the 5th level. Although the lotus flowers in the pond had all withered, they bloomed in his heart. His mind had never been as clear as it was now. It was not like the spirit turtle, calculating to the extreme. Instead, it was a comprehension that could see through everything with a single glance. These lotus flowers must have been personally planted by the Buddha. They had the same aura as the scroll. The only question was why he could touch these lotus flowers. Is it because I'm a Qilin? No, that's not all. As a Khanate god, he could sense the existence of the great Tao at birth. Compared to those ignorant and muddle-headed living beings, he could be said to have one at the starting line. Furthermore, under the guidance of the great Tao, there were almost no inner demons or bottlenecks. However, he had to go through the process of cultivation and constantly accumulate strength to clearly understand the great Tao and even take a step forward to touch it. With his current cultivation realm, he did not have this ability at all. There was only one explanation. It's this world that gave me this ability, allowing me to see and touch. The feeling here is very similar to Ruin's End. It's like returning to my home. The world responded to his every move. He looked down at the spiritual mountain and the vegetation that grew wildly. Then there's only one answer. This isn't some paradise, but the home of the Qilin. This must be the world formed by the primordial Qilin. Furthermore, just like the primordial spirit turtle, it was very likely that it had died in the battle of mending the heavens and turned into this paradise. It was then occupied by the Buddhists and became the so-called paradise. What he did not know was that as the lotus flowers withered, the paradise was in chaos. Demonic beasts ran amok everywhere in the city, running around in broad daylight. How dare you? How dare you open the seal and destroy the Tempest Temple? What punishment do you deserve? A furious voice resounded through the sky. The Sangha god's body became even larger than the spiritual mountain. His face was green, and his brows were raised in anger. He gritted his teeth so hard that it sounded like thunder. He held the twin maces in his hands. Protecting the temple was the most important mission of the Sangha god, and the Tempest Temple was even more important. However, after this place was sealed, he could not come and go without permission. The moment the Tempest Temple opened, he sensed it and immediately flew over. However, he was blocked by the Ruo River and could not fly over. It took him some effort to cross the Quicksand River. When he saw the miserable state of the Tempest Temple, he was infuriated. If not for the Tempest Temple below, he would have smashed them into meat paste with his maces. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately felt the power of a god. This is going to be big. Can I pretend that I'm just an innocent and kind-hearted little Qilin that is passing by? Anyway, everyone knows that Qilin is a benevolent beast and would not do bad things. However, if the Sangha god knew that I'm Li Qingshan, I'm afraid it will go crazy. Abbot Yangon fell to the ground. Your Holiness, this is all my fault. It has nothing to do with Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan spat out a mouthful of blood. Li Qingshan? The Sangha god's eyes narrowed. He immediately saw through the Qilin's identity. So it's you. It's you. Li Qingshan laughed dryly. It's me. I haven't seen you in a long time, boss. Hey, since we're all living in the same temple, why don't you let me go? Actually, we didn't do it on purpose. Don't you think so, Master Yangon? The Sangha god suddenly put away his anger and threw down his maces. Two loud thuds could be heard. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't think that making friends with the Sangha god would work. Chapter 1585. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Shua, the corner of Li Qingshan's mouth twitched. Damn it, we're done for this time. Looking at Abbot Yangon again, he had already closed his eyes and was waiting to be slaughtered. Bastard, you're the one who brought me to this damned place. Take responsibility for it. However, he had to admit that if he hadn't courted death by sniffing those lotuses and turned the great Layin temple into this state, the Garan deity might not have been so furious. Perhaps it would have just taught him a lesson. But it was too late now. If apologies were useful, what was the use of divine powers? When a true god was enraged, the earth would collapse and the mountains would collapse. After praying to the Tathagata Buddha, Goddess Garan's fair and supple skin had turned as red as lava. His originally gentle face was now as ferocious as an evil spirit. His blood-red eyes widened as he slowly lowered his gaze. Boom! Li Qingshan's pupils constricted as he felt a mountainous pressure bearing down on him. His legs went soft and he almost knelt on the ground. However, the bricks under his feet did not crack at all, as if it was just an illusion. No, this is not an illusion. This was the oppression of the laws. After becoming a true god, he could already control the laws, and he didn't even need to use spells. Every move he made contained great might and dignity. As the guardian deity, the blue deity had slain countless evil demons. His baleful aura was one of the strongest in the entire Buddhist sect. Hey, evil creature, hand over your life. A fierce shout, like a sudden clap of thunder, the angry roar of a lion. Li Qingshan's heart trembled violently. His internal organs shifted and his liver and gallbladder felt like it was about to split apart. His entire body felt limp and powerless, and fresh blood gushed out of his mouth. The lion's roar was also known as the lion's roar technique. It was one of the most common magical techniques in Buddhism. Not only could many cultivators use it, but it was also a common technique that even Jianghu experts with some inner force could use. However, when it was cast by a true god, using the formless laws as a medium, its destructive power was so great that even Li Qingshan's fiend god body could not withstand it. If not for the fact that he had hidden his primordial spirit in the deepest part of the small world, he might have been destroyed by the roar. Love go, small, say, net chu however, it did not harm a single blade of grass or tree in the great thunderclap temple. The abbot Yangon, who was nearby, only heard an angry roar. Seeing the Kirin wobble and refuse to fall, the blue god was a bit surprised. Seeing that the great Lei temple had been destroyed, he was enraged. He looked like he was about to slay a demon, and he didn't hold back at all. She had thought that a mere divine general who had just undergone 6 heavenly tribulations would immediately collapse to the ground, but she was still able to hold on. However, his face darkened. He was merely struggling at death's door. "Accept your fate," Zhang Xian said as he stretched his hand forward. Li Qingshan's vision darkened, as if dark clouds were covering his head. Under the gaze of those eyes, not only did the pressure not weaken in the slightest, it became even heavier. It was as if he was trapped in an invisible cage and was heavily injured, unable to resist. This is the gap between man and God. In the palm of a god, the Qilin god beast was like a pig or a dog. This is the origin of those nightmares? That fear, that anger, that despair. It's still the same recipe and it's still the same familiar smell. Roar! The Kirin roared, and all beasts roared in unison. At this moment of life and death, the ox demon, tiger demon, and ape demon, who had been assimilated by this world and gradually retreated, all returned to their original state. They became obsessed, stubborn, and bloodthirsty beasts. Rumble! The blue god's fingers closed. In an instant, the Kirin's 4 hooves flew into the air, breaking through the invisible cage, and leaped out from between the fingers. The indigo god was slightly taken aback. Its sure kill claw had missed. As the god of the blue god, he specialized in combat. In terms of combat ability, he was even better than ordinary arhats and true immortals. Moreover, in the home field of the Western Paradise, he could easily capture any kind of demon with a stare, a shout, and a grab. But just now, the laws of heaven and earth fluctuated strangely, distorting the laws he controlled. Even now, it was still fluctuating, like ripples spreading outwards, but also like a whirlpool spinning inwards. At the center of the ripples and whirlpools was Li Qingshan. Having escaped death, Li Qingshan's heart was filled with joy. It was the joy of being alive. He opened the divine eye on his forehead and saw the changes in the laws of the world, which made him even more certain of his speculation. The original appearance of this world was the legendary Qilin Paradise. Although he had no idea what method the Buddhists had used to turn this place into a so-called Western Paradise, the origin of the world could not be changed so easily. The lotus flowers were the materialization of the origin, condensed by the Buddha. It was probably to protect the Tempest Temple, but it was also a method of suppression. He caused the lotus flowers to wither, obtaining the origin, and releasing the origin, returning the Western Paradise to the Qilin Paradise. The world protected him. Endless life force surged through his body, rapidly healing his wounds. The child of destiny, no, the ruler. It was just like how the spirit turtle was the ruler of the ruin's end. This was not the home field of the blue god, but his. Although this was nowhere near enough to make up for the difference between the two of them, it gave him a sliver of hope. He did not attempt to flee the Tempest Temple. Instead, he leapt into the Grand Hall. This was the largest hall he had ever seen in his life. The ceiling seemed even higher than the sky, covered in beautiful murals. There were goddesses, dragons, elephants, temples, scriptures, and so on. They were all shrouded in hazy clouds. He could only raise his head to look at them, and he immediately felt insignificant. Tall, dignified statues of gods, bodhisattvas, arhats, heavenly kings, wisdom kings. All the gods of Buddhism were present. They were either in deep thought, silent with their eyes closed, or beaming with joy. They were in a myriad of forms, vivid and lifelike. The blue god could only sit at the end of the table here. Under the gaze of the divine eye, a beam of light pierced through the ceiling and entered the statue. The eyes shone brightly, glaring at him furiously. Are all the gods and Buddhas watching me? The thought gave him a fright, but on further thought, I've already come this far, so what's there to be afraid of? I'll die with my eggs in the sky, and I'll live for tens of thousands of years if I don't die. Instead, he found it interesting and couldn't help but laugh like a proud monkey. To the demonic ape, there was nothing that couldn't be joked about. The blue god statue suddenly shook its body and walked down from the altar with the twin maces in its hands. With heavy footsteps, it approached with a murderous aura, wanting to drive him out of the grand hall. The heavy pressure was still everywhere, but under the protection of the laws of heaven and earth, it was not enough to hold him in place. However, he knew very well that he couldn't even deal with this god statue. If a few more gods and Buddhas descended, the scene would be too beautiful. However, perhaps it was because the Tempest Temple was sealed by the Gautama Buddha, which cut off the connection with the outside world. Those god statues remained motionless, only silently watching him. He rolled over and dodged the twin maces in a sorry state. He transformed back into his human form, rolled his eyes, and pointed at the blue god statue. Stop! If you dare to make another move, I'll smash this place into pieces. As he said this, he kicked a long-browed arhat beside him. With a loud bang, he smashed a big hole in the ground, and his long eyebrows were also broken. Stop! You get out of here! The blue god's angry roar reverberated through the dome, but it didn't dare to act rashly for fear of breaking the vases. It's better if you get out of here. Li Qingshan grabbed the Sangarama statue and tossed it out the door viciously before closing the door behind him. At this time, he had already reached the depths of the grand hall. He looked up at the Gautama Buddha in the center and suddenly smiled. Outside the hall, the blue god angrily questioned Abbot Yangon, "Did you bring him here?" Abbot Yangon smiled bitterly. "Yes, it was me." "Why did you do this?" I was wrong. Abbot Yangon shook his head, and his face became even older. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. If it was just opening the seal without permission, he could bear the sin. However, at this point, Li Qingshan couldn't escape death. He couldn't hide inside for the rest of his life, so he was just stalling for time. He let out a long sigh. "Qingshan, it's all my fault." Before he had even finished speaking, there was a great rumble, and the entrance of the grand hall was smashed to pieces. Li Qingshan rushed out from inside, turning into a demonic god that stood as tall as a mountain. He held the great Buddha statue hostage with one hand and wrapped his other around the Buddha's neck. He angrily shouted, "Let me go!" Abbot Yangon was stunned. Li Qingshan glanced at him. "I almost forgot about you. Don't panic, I have a hostage." He angrily shouted at the blue god, "Let us go." The blue god's face twisted, and his chest heaved up and down. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He had cultivated his mind for a lifetime, but he couldn't suppress his anger. Chapter 1586. Do you think I dare? Li Qingshan sneered. The blue deity was shocked. This young man had no fear at all. He could not help but ask, "Do you know what this statue of Buddha in the Tempest Temple means?" Li Qingshan looked around and answered calmly, "A dilapidated temple and a clay statue." The great Thunderclap Temple had indeed become dilapidated. However, compared to the original solemn and silent atmosphere, the grass was now long and the nightingales were flying, and the trees were giving shade. It seemed full of life. The bright moon hung high in the sky and shone down. The bodhisattvas and arhats sat quietly in the mottled light. They seemed to have the joys and sorrows of mortals. Only the Buddha statue that was held hostage by Li Qingshan still had a faint smile on its face. He knocked on the head of the Buddha statue. You're wrong. It's not a clay statue, it's gold. However, to me, gold is no different from mud. I see. The blue deity's anger disappeared. The anger of the Sangharama deity also turned into understanding. These words were not meant to slander the Buddhist sect, but were the most sincere thoughts. This attitude, it was too familiar. Outside the vast sea, the pair of golden eyes watched everything silently. He laughed. Old man Buddha, this is your day. This young man is too interesting. Interesting, really interesting. This young man is more dangerous than the demons in the demon domain. We must not let him leave this place alive. The blue deity suddenly made up his mind. He put his palms together and bowed to the sky. Reporting to the revered one, please forgive me for my incompetence. I cannot protect the three treasures. Wait. I was just saying. You don't have to take it seriously. Li Qingshan's expression froze. He had already guessed what the blue deity was going to say next. This trick again. You are the guardian deity of Buddhism. What happened to faith? The abbot did not know whether to laugh or cry. A dilapidated temple and clay statue? Li Qingshan did not wait for the blue deity to flip the table. He hugged the Buddha statue tightly, twisted his waist, and threw it with all his might. Go! Whoosh! The Tathagata Buddha statue shot straight into the sky, passing right in front of the Kalen deity. If it had been a blur, one would have thought that the Buddha had manifested his spirit. At the same time, Li Qingshan's feet stamped on the ground. He grabbed Abbot Yangon and soared into the sky. The instant he jumped off the cliff, he unfolded his wings and whistled through the air. The blue god flew into the sky and held the Tathagata Buddha statue in his hand. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Although he had already made up his mind, it was still best not to damage the Buddha statue. His divine eyes were like lightning, coldly sweeping over. Evil creature, your time has come. Li Qingshan felt a chill run down his spine. He shuddered and looked back. The blue god descended from the sky and respectfully returned the Buddha statue to the hall of great strength. He was not in the slightest bit anxious. He would be able to catch up in an instant. How could a divine general be faster than a true god? Moreover, this was the Western paradise, so where could he escape to? It was as easy as catching a turtle in a jar. It would be difficult for him to escape death. Li Qingshan was well aware of this. Evil rose in his heart, and anger grew in his heart. He suddenly stopped and turned to face the spirit mountain under the cold moon. He frowned and opened his eyes wide, revealing a ferocious tiger's face. Are you done cursing me? A strange look flashed in the blue god's eyes. This child always exceeded his expectations. Under the pressure of his divine might, he actually dared to stop and turn to face him. This kind of courage, this kind of boldness, was not something a divine general could possess. The blue god's killing intent hardened. If he didn't kill him here today, he would definitely become a great threat in the future. He pointed his halberd at Li Qingshan. Evil creature, what can you do to me? I'll know after I try. Li Qingshan reached into his robes and grabbed the mountain-shifting token. He waved it at the spirit mountain. In an instant, a loud sound shook the heavens and earth. Under the cold moon, the spirit mountain actually began to slowly collapse and press down on the blue god. The blue god was dumbfounded. No, this is impossible. This is impossible. How can a mere divine general possess such power? You can bow again now. Li Qingshan sneered and raised his eyebrows. He imitated the blue god's voice and said, Please forgive this disciple for being useless. I can't even protect the great Thunderclap Temple. What? Ha! The blue god could only watch as the mountain pressed down on him. If he wanted to dodge, he could, but this was the spirit mountain. Protecting the Nalanda temple had been his first mission. Every brick, every tile, every blade of grass, every tree here was entrusted with great aspirations and glory. This was something that outsiders could not understand. He roared angrily. Not only did he not flee, but he spread his arms wide and used his chest to press against the toppling mountain. He used all of his divine power to support the spirit mountain. Abbot Yangon stared at this scene in a daze. Suddenly, tears gushed out of his eyes. He reached out as if he wanted to lend the blue god a hand. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the two forces collided, countless pagodas collapsed and the statues and murals shattered. The veins on the blue god's forehead bulged. Its muscles bulged as it pressed against the spirit mountain, trying to hold it upright. However, it destroyed even more pagodas. Its eyes were about to pop out of its sockets as it gritted its teeth. This lion's roar was filled with violence. Li Qingshan was sent flying. His bones cracked and were covered in cracks. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Very good, you finally remembered my name. Even if I have to die here today, I will let you know what pain is. Earth, fire, wind, water, ox, tiger, scaled, and tortoise. The small world revolved and poured all of its power into the mountain-shifting token. He waved it at the spirit mountain. The spirit mountain continued to topple. The blue god could not hold on any longer. Its eyes widened in despair as it vaguely saw an incomparably large figure behind Li Qingshan. A pair of clear yellow lion-like eyes stared at it. The great saint of the moving mountain. In a faraway country, the pair of golden eyes blinked. Stupid lion. It subconsciously stopped smiling. Fourth brother. Abbot Yangon could not hold it in any longer. He shouted, Li Qingshan, stop. Stop. If this goes on, everything will be destroyed, destroyed. He covered his face and cried. Unknowingly, he had become as old as Li Qingshan when they first met. Li Qingshan let go of him. Monk, I will fight him to the death. Spread the truth about what you have discovered, and our trip will not have been in vain. Although he did not know what Abbot Yangon had discovered in the Tempest Temple that had shaken him so much, it should be detrimental to the Buddhist sect. No, I can't. Abbot Yangon looked terrified. Li Qingshan stared at him. Then come and kill me. This is the simplest way to protect the spirit mountain and the Buddhist sect. He had poured all of his power into the mountain-shifting token. There was no way he could resist. I can't. Abbot Yangon shook his head. Sai, why do you have to do this? Li Qingshan took a step forward. The mountain-shifting token pressed down inch by inch. He was determined to fight the gods. Under the pressure of these two godly powers, the spirit mountain gradually shattered and collapsed. The blue god roared angrily and refused to give up. It was buried by millions of tons of rocks. The spirit mountain collapsed. The main hall, the pagoda, the bell tower, the goddess, the dragon elephant, the sutra, the bodhisattva, the arhat, the wisdom king. Chapter 1587. Abbot Yangon closed his eyes in pain. Amitabha. The spiritual mountain collapsed, and the surrounding snow mountains collapsed as well. The rumbling echoed in the world. Li Qingshan's right hand was torn, and the mountain-shifting token in his hand was dyed red. It trembled uncontrollably. He grabbed his wrist with his left hand and slowly lowered his right arm. He let out a long breath. However, he could not escape from the pure land of ultimate bliss. Everything was in vain. The Sangharama deity had not suffered a fatal blow. It was only a matter of time before it broke free from the soil and rocks. Boom! 10,000 tons of soil and rocks were thrown into the sky, and an arm reached out from the ruins. It suddenly pressed down on the ground, supporting its majestic body. Millions of tons of soil and rocks flew everywhere, and the ground rumbled. Li Qingshan's eyes twitched, and then he smiled. A god was really powerful. The Sangharama deity insisted on holding the spiritual mountain, which was equivalent to being smashed in the face by the spiritual mountain. It actually had such terrifying strength. He really had no other choice now. The mountain-shifting token could only command the mountains in the world. It had no effect on a collapsed mountain. That was beyond the laws of nature. Monk, there's something I forgot to ask. Where did those demonic beasts come from? Li Qingshan suddenly had an idea. Don't tell me they were also brought here by Buddha? Now that he thought about it, Abbot Yangon had brought him to that city. He had obviously predicted that there would be demonic beasts and wanted to stimulate his memory. Before the demonic beasts came, there were guards who started to disperse the crowd and sound the alarm. They were completely used to it. The path was always connected. If the demonic beasts could come, I could go. A ray of hope lit up the path ahead. They will appear at midnight, but once they are illuminated by the sun, they will disappear. As for the rest, I'm not sure. Abbot Yangon's words were vague. It was obvious that he was hiding something. Midnight, no wonder the bell tolls 12 times. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. He immediately grasped the key point. That ray of hope became even more dazzling. Midnight was the beginning of Yang, but it was also the time of extreme Yin. There had to be some loophole in Buddha's modification of this Qilin paradise. Otherwise, there would be no reason for the demonic beasts to come in. He still didn't know that because of the withering of the lotus in the pond, magical beasts were running amok everywhere in the Elysium. He raised his head and glanced at the dark sky. It was almost midnight. There was still about an hour left. The crux of the problem now was how to hold on until then. The blue divine god's mountainous back had already risen up from the ruins. Let alone 2 hours, even a quarter hour was enough to kill him 100 times over. Boom! The blue god's head popped out of the ground and roared, "Li Qing!" A huge mountain came head-on, and with a boom, it smashed his head and back heavily into the earth and rocks. "Mountain!" Li Qingshan said the last word on his behalf, then put down the mountain-shifting medallion in his hand. If he suffered another lion's roar, even if he was stunned for just a moment, he would definitely die. Of the 3 mountains that the mountain-shifting great sage had given him, the yellow cliff peak had crushed flowerless Ghost Immortal to death, and this was the second Wolf Fong Mountain. Unlike Mount Numinous, these 3 mountains were connate Dharma treasures that had been refined and contained the power of laws. Even the blue divine god had a splitting headache after suffering such a blow. There was a crack on its back, as if it had been broken. In particular, it felt suffocated, and its organs were displaced. It could not recover in a short period of time. Amitabha, 4th brother, please watch over us. Li Qingshan said to Abbot Yangon, don't take it too hard. It's just a mountain. I'll return it to you. Moreover, because it had landed on the ruins of Mount Numinous, this Wolf Fong Mountain was even taller and steeper than Mount Numinous. It would probably not take long for flowers and trees to grow again, and the top of the mountain would be covered in snow. However, there would no longer be messy murals and statues. It would be a clean expanse of whiteness. Abbot Yangon could not bring himself to laugh at this joke. He stared blankly at Wolf Fong Mountain and suddenly understood something. He murmured, mountains come and go, flowers fall and bloom. Success, residence, destruction, and emptiness, there is no exception. Li Qingshan could not understand his gatha and was desperately thinking of a countermeasure. First, he would try his best to increase the distance between them and fly tens of thousands of miles in one go. But to a deity, distance was meaningless when it came to shrinking the earth into an inch and being so close yet worlds apart. Next, he would run to a large city and use the citizens as hostages to threaten the blue divine god. Not to mention whether the blue divine god would fall for this, he was not willing to do such a stupid thing. Or he might as well use the mysterious ancient bronze sword to kill the blue divine god while it could not move. But how could it be so easy to kill a god? He thought of several countermeasures and rejected them one by one. After thinking about it, there was only one method that might work. Monk, I should go. Do you want to come with me? Forget it. I'm afraid I can't protect you. Anyway, the blue divine god will definitely come looking for me. It won't be difficult for you to hold out until midnight. Let's go our separate ways. The Yangon abbot took out a book from his bosom and passed it to Li Qingshan. If you can escape alive, please pass this to the white-bone successor. Li Qingshan took the book. It was a thin folded book and there was no name on the cover. When he opened it, there was not a single word inside. What book is this? But Abbot Yangon said, I should go too. He did not fly, but sat in a lotus position in the air with his palms together. His aged face shone with light, clear and transparent, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His expression was serene and he was silent. Li Qingshan was stunned. He reached out and touched it. His body turned into dust and dissipated, along with the secret he discovered in the Great Thunderclap Monastery. Hey, it was easy for you to leave. Li Qingshan shook his head. He did not know whether he should be happy for him or sad for him. The wolf ivory mountain in the distance shook violently, as if it would collapse at any time. He stuffed the book into his bosom and happened to touch something. Immediately, he thought of a story. He flew to the top of Wolf Ivory Mountain and spat on the rock wall. Go! With a smack, he pasted the letter with the great bright incantation on it. The mountain was still shaking violently, and the letters slowly slid down. Yes, fairy tales are all lies. Li Qingshan turned around and fled, disappearing into the horizon in a ray of light. In the blink of an eye, he arrived above the Ruoshui River again. He felt empty around him and immediately fell down. However, this was his goal. The moment he entered the water, he turned into a spirit turtle. With a plop, he dove into the depths of the surging Ruoshui River. He chose a place to hide and retracted his head and limbs into his shell. He concealed all his aura and concealed all his fate. At the same time, a mirror clone rushed into the sky, carrying his aura and fate. It passed through the 3,000 Ruoshui River and flew into the distance. There was still more than an hour before midnight. This was his only chance to survive. With the talent of the pure-blooded spirit turtle, he could conceal himself to the end. The coward would follow his heart. Chapter 1588. The spirit turtle lurked at the bottom of the quicksand river, blending in with the water. It was like a heavy rock that had been buried for 1,000 years. It had no aura, no fate, no sorrow or joy. It was separated from everything, avoiding all the troubles of the mortal world. Li Qingshan seemed to forget about his main body as well, devoting all of his attention to his clone. The fierce winds whistled past his ears as he rapidly approached the horizon, crossing thousands of kilometers of pure land in a single breath. Whether it was the city, the wilderness, the forest, or the lake, they all blurred into brilliant colors. The yellow city, the green wilderness, the black forest, and the blue lake. The colors blended and wove together, constantly changing. It was enough to make him dizzy. However, he dared not relax at all. All he did was constantly push harder and harder. If the phoenix wings faltered for even the slightest moment, they would be ripped to shreds by the incoming wind. Even with that being the case, the clone gradually broke apart and collapsed from the inside. With the major accomplishment of the spirit turtle, he could pour all of his power into his mirror clone. However, the clone could not possess the reaction speed and toughness of his main body. Even if it did possess power, it could not unleash it completely. However, this was already enough. He could pass off the fake as the real one. He did not need to react fast, nor did he need to last for too long. He only needed to flee for an hour. The riverbed shook. If he had not sensed it carefully, he would not have sensed it at all. The Wolf Fong Mountain collapsed. The Samara god finally broke free from the gaze of the orange-yellow eyes. Its armor was damaged, and its back was bruised, oozing with blood. It seemed rather miserable. It raised its head and gazed in the direction Li Qingshan had fled in. It did not roar or bellow. Instead, it was unusually calm. It was no longer an attitude of looking down on him and cleaning up after him. Instead, it treated him as an equal, or even like it was facing a great enemy. Since the mountain-moving medallion had appeared, the great tribulation of the world would descend once more. It was not for these statues, nor was it for the great lightning monastery, but for the entire Buddhist sect. Li Qingshan, you must die here. His eyes were like lightning, crossing the horizon in a single instant and locking onto Li Qingshan, who was thousands of kilometers away. He held his truncheons upside down and took a step forward. He had already arrived on the banks of quicksand. Afterwards, he spent some time crossing the river and took another step, arriving another 1,500 kilometers away. With a speed of 3,000 miles per step, he crossed mountains, rivers, and lakes, chasing after Li Qingshan. Suddenly, a large city that stretched for hundreds of miles appeared on the horizon. It was the place where he was going to land next. He only needed to slow down a little or take a detour to avoid the city. However, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. With a step into the city, he disappeared beyond the horizon. Only a deep footprint was left behind, and it immediately triggered a huge earthquake. Countless houses and buildings collapsed, and wails could be heard everywhere. The blue god took its 8th step. It was already standing in front of Li Qingshan. It crossed its maces in front of him and unleashed a shocking attack. Boom! Without any room for maneuver, the mirror avatar burst like a bubble. Under the water, Li Qingshan opened his eyes and was also shocked. Even if it's my original body, I can't withstand this attack. Even the nirvana of the phoenix is useless. This was the difference between a god and a human. Once he was found, he would die. Less than a quarter of an hour had passed, and he had to hold on for at least another 45 minutes. The blue god frowned and closed its eyes. Its thoughts were like lightning. It immediately opened and caught a thread of fate. Hiding in the water, yes, the water. He returned to the quicksand bank in a few steps. Looking at the murky and surging water, the clue was broken. If it was an ordinary river, he could clear it with a wave of his hand. However, this water was not ordinary water. Even immortals would find it difficult to cross. All spells and abilities were restricted. It was indeed the best place to hide. Are you the only one with an avatar? The blue god snorted coldly. Its mountain-like body suddenly collapsed and turned into millions of small blue gods. They rushed into the water, and the water level immediately rose. Since abilities were useless, then he would use the most primitive method to search for him. He would search inch by inch in the water. Li Qingshan's heart was like the deep sea. He was silent and motionless. He was not shocked, angry, or afraid. The river surged and passed. Time passed bit by bit. Quarter after quarter, it was getting closer and closer to midnight. Yin flourished and Yang waned. The darkness deepened, as if they had returned to the ruins of End. The blue gods searched more than half of the river and quickly approached Li Qingshan's position. At this time, every second was slow and sluggish. There was still a quarter of an hour left. The blue god's army followed the riverbed and was already 10 miles away. 10,000 feet. 3,000 feet. 100 feet. Found it. Millions of blue gods shouted in unison, shaking the water and causing huge waves to surge. Li Qingshan drew his sword and stood up, cleaving through the raging waves. The sword chi was cold, and with a single slash, nearly 1,000 small blue gods were wiped out. However, this was only a drop in the ocean. In an instant, all the avatars merged into one and looked down from the clouds. Wait, I have something to say. Li Qingshan shouted, hoping to buy a little more time. Yes, just a little more was enough. However, what answered him was a cross of the 2 maces. This shocking strike had not yet landed, but the sound of the 2 maces clashing had already caused his primordial spirit to tremble. He was almost unable to hold the ancient bronze sword. The invisible interweaving laws of heaven and earth sealed off all possibilities of evasion. There was no time to transform into a Qilin, no time to take out the mountain-moving token. At this critical juncture, every second was precious and difficult to obtain. He did not even have time to think. Only 2 words appeared in his mind: it's over. Boom. 800 miles of quicksand and 3,000 miles of water were cut in half. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes and produced a thump. His heartbeat sounded like thunder. I'm not done. Time was still passing. The river water that had flown into the sky poured down like a torrential rain, pouring into the empty riverbed. His black eyes reflected a golden-red figure that caught the descending maces. The blue god's expression changed, but no matter how much his muscles bulged and his hair stood up in anger, the maces could not fall another inch. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. You are, under the phoenix feather purple-gold crown, his golden hair fluttered like the sun. He looked back and smiled, as innocent as a newborn child. His golden eyes seemed to see through his past and present lives. Traitor! The blue god's angry roar shook the heavens and earth, but there was a hint of helplessness in his anger. The golden eyes turned to look at the blue god. He pursed his lips and waved the maces away. He picked his ear with his little finger and took out a golden needle. With a wave of his hand, he turned it into a pillar and stabbed it upwards, as if he wanted to poke a hole in the sky. The blue god's mountain-like body was sent flying, and no one knew where it went. Li Qingshan was about to go forward, but it was already midnight. Yin and Yang changed, and the extreme Yin gave birth to Yang. In that instant, the laws of heaven and earth in the pure land of ultimate bliss seemed to slow down. Vaguely, he could feel demonic energy surging and hear the roars of demonic beasts. Between heaven and earth, countless devil lairs suddenly opened and then quickly closed. Kid, you are the one chosen by Old Bull. You are more interesting than I thought. Li Qingshan grew slightly accustomed to the gaze from the pair of scarlet golden eyes. Only now did he notice that it was the most beautiful face he had ever seen in his life. It was not the so-called handsomeness of the secular world, but a kind of flawless beauty. A demonic cave suddenly opened below him. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should go in. A hand pressed on his chest and pushed gently. We will meet again. Wait. Li Qingshan fell into the demonic cave. The darkness closed in front of him, and the scarlet figure disappeared. He felt lost. Above the Ruoshui, the golden eyes suddenly looked up, through the layers of clouds, the heavens, and beyond the starry sky. He laughed angrily. Old man Rilai, the tribulation is here. Let's see how long you can trap me. Under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha lay peacefully. He supported his head with his right arm and opened his left hand. As if he had heard something, he looked down at his palm and met the pair of scarlet gold eyes. The pure land of ultimate bliss was in his palm. Their eyes met for a moment and he smiled. He propped himself up and looked around. There were golden bricks everywhere, and golden leaves danced in the wind. A gust of wind blew, and there was a strange rhythm. It was accompanied by the strange chirping of birds, which calmed one's mind. Chapter 1589. In a desolate desert in the demonic realm, the barren land was devoid of life. A few withered bushes trembled in the cold wind. The gloomy, low-hanging clouds were like a dirty, thick cloth. Even the rocks were suffocated, and they had been crushed into gravel after years of perseverance. A figure suddenly broke through the clouds and descended from the sky. Before he landed on the ground, he stopped in midair. What? Torrential rain poured down on Li Qingshan's face. He clenched his fists and looked down at the desolate land. After confirming that there was no threat, he slowly put down his fists and let out a long sigh. He relaxed and opened his arms to the sky, letting the torrential rain wash over him as he laughed heartily. His laughter was like rolling thunder. The pressure of the Sangha deity was too great. Coupled with the assimilation of the pure land of ultimate bliss, he had to be tense at all times. Now he had finally escaped, fighting a strong enemy and breaking through a desperate situation. Wasn't it great? Everything was still vivid in his mind, especially that pair of golden eyes. They were so clear that they were like a brand. It made his blood boil, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. Could he be a traitor? No, why would a traitor save me? Moreover, we are different from those fellows in the sky. You have to believe. Great sage Yuanfeng's words still echoed in his ears. But the suppression of the great sages must have something to do with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so angry and sad. That sentence of, "you have to believe," seemed more like he was trying to persuade himself. Moreover, the Sangha deity also called him a traitor. He must have converted to Buddhism. What's going on? Li Qingshan thought about it but couldn't figure it out. He didn't want to waste any more time. After all, the truth would be revealed one day. If they were friends, then they would work together to fight the gods and Buddhas. If they were enemies, then they would fight to the death. Even if his position as Old Eight changed a little, his transmigration would not be in vain. My big saber is thirsty. Unfortunately, he didn't have a saber now. He only had an ancient bronze sword of unknown origin. He couldn't use it carelessly. He always felt that there was some conspiracy behind it. However, he could not bear to lose it. Now that he was about to fight the Qiongqi, he would have an additional weapon that could save his life at a crucial moment. Forget it. Let's talk about it after I settle my bet with Cheong-chi and transcend the seventh heavenly tribulation. At that time, I should be able to understand the secrets of this sword. For ordinary cultivators, becoming a human immortal was already extremely difficult. If they wanted to become a true immortal, their chances were practically slim. Even if they were to spend 10,000 years, they still might not be able to succeed. The reason why Li Qingshan was so confident was because he had the 9 transformations of demons and gods. As his cultivation level increased, he was able to understand its wonders. Unlike ordinary cultivators, his path was not the only one that was unchanging. When others found it difficult to walk, or even when there was no path to walk, he only needed to change to another path. He did not have to worry about not having a path to walk, and he could always keep moving forward. Although the adventure in the Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss could be said to be extremely dangerous, it allowed the Qilin transformation to break through several layers. If it was just a closed-door meditation, who knew how many years it would take? It seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually because his path was just too wild. There was no place he could not go. Of course, if he did not possess a strong enough will, spirit, and courage, he would not be able to endure all these changes. In short, I am. Amidst the storm, the young man in the past had already become a demigod, but his youthful spirit became even more ostentatious. I wonder where that crazy woman Rongji's. He shaded his eyes and gazed into the distance. All he saw was the endless desert. The demon domain was boundless. If he wanted to find Qingqi Mountain, he needed someone to lead the way. Otherwise, if he accidentally ran into the hands of another demon god, probably no great sage would come to save him. The greatest lesson he had learned from the battle against the Sangha god was that he was still not the opponent of any true god. If it were not for the Sangha god being cautious and unwilling to destroy the Nalanda temple, he would have been taken down already. He would have been done for. In the end, he still needed to have a clear understanding of the difference in strength. Will, spirit, and courage could all be converted into strength, but they could not directly replace it. As a result, he could only defeat Cheongqi through wits, not brute force. It would be best if he made his way to the foot of Qingqi Mountain silently and immediately fished out the mountain-moving tablet, toppling Qingqi Mountain in a single stroke. Then, everything would be fine. He fished out a skull prayer bead in an attempt to contact Little and in help him determine Qian Rongji's location. However, after fiddling with it for a while, the skull prayer bead did not respond at all. It was probably because he was in the depths of the demon domain, and the demon domain was not within the 6 realms of Sasra, so the connection had been severed. However, he was not completely out of options. His eyes turned a deep blue, becoming as profound as the underworld. At that moment, the storm stopped. The droplets of rain hovered in the air, forming a flat hexagon around Li Qingshan. With the completion of the spirit turtle transformation, he developed several more innate abilities, including abilities for divination and divination. The reason why he did not name them one by one was because these abilities had already begun to internalize, gradually becoming a form of instinct. They were like extensions of his limbs, and there were no longer any clear boundaries between them. Instead, they were all connected. The ingenuity of their usage depended on a single thought. For example, the divination he was performing right now basically used all of his innate abilities. It was like raising an arm required the brain to control it and the heart to transfuse blood. Even his legs would be affected. He basically had to use all of his organs. There was no point in giving it a domineering name like Green Mountain's Black Claw anymore. His head spun slowly like a radar, and the hexagon formed from the millions of droplets spun with it. His deep eyes rippled slightly, as if he could pierce through the endless space and grasp a thread of fate. Suddenly, he locked onto a direction. I've got it. The storm continued to fall, and he had already vanished into the curtain of rain. The sky darkened very soon. The demon domain had always had short days and long nights. This was a city shrouded in haze. The streets crisscrossed like spider webs, and rectangular skyscrapers rose from the ground one after another, hidden in the depths of the gloomy clouds. It was impossible to tell how tall they were. It was like a gray forest. Cylindrical chimneys were scattered about, spitting out colorful smoke that was pungent like the breath of a monster. It merged with the haze and fell as rain. Looking up, the rain seemed to be black, landing on the neon lights that flickered at the corners of the streets. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes in surprise. For a moment, he felt like he had returned to his past life. However, he immediately realized that all of this was the creation of mechanisms and magic, not some product of science and technology. The skyscrapers were just the most natural choice to accommodate as many people as possible. Moreover, these skyscrapers only had the same shape and color. They were extremely empty and monotonous, truly a concrete forest. If he stayed here for too long, it could basically drive any normal person crazy. He had already begun to miss the Elysium. There were gardens, plazas, and markets everywhere. Not long ago, that was the largest city he had ever seen in his life. Now, his understanding was refreshed. This gray city was not only larger, but it could accommodate more than 100 million people. Chapter 1590. Li Qingshan could not help but frown. He had known that crazy woman for many years, but he had never developed a shred of closeness or even familiarity with her. There was only deep disgust. He had always wanted to find an opportunity to kill her, but she had never given him a reason to do so. Instead, she had cooperated with him many times, lending him a hand at crucial moments. It was the same right now. He had to find her in this colossal demonic capital, even if the tremendous number of demon folk had muddled his fate. He could not help but slow down. Relying on his lingering sense of existence, he moved between the tall buildings. The streets were empty, with very few pedestrians. They maintained their distance cautiously. Li Qingshan found this strange. In the past, demon folk had mostly been on the battlefield, but now, they seemed no different from regular people. Even their demon chi had been assimilated by the demonic capital, so there was nothing special about them. He crushed a puddle of water as the rainbows swayed and splashed. He walked alone in the cold, rainy night. Suddenly, he felt rather melancholic. He had not felt this way for many years already. He could not help but ponder it carefully. He thought back to the Elysium, the passionate square, and the revelers. It was so blissful that it was like a dream. Now that he had woken up from the dream, people walked alone. They were cold and wary of one another. The contrast was far too great. He could not help but prick up his ears, wanting to hear some sounds. He widened his eyes in an attempt to find something. As a result, he heard countless moans, curses, and sobs lurking in the depths of the forest. Every window had a tragedy. This damned place. Suddenly, he heard a woman's cries for help, as well as the cruel laughter and excited gasps of a few men nearby. He was rather impatient. Just now, it had only been a short while, and he had already heard enough of this crap. It was enough to numb even the most righteous person, and he was not even some righteous person. However, he seemed to hear something again, so he made a few turns and stopped at the entrance of a dirty alleyway. In the depths of the alleyway, a few demon folk turned around. They all seemed very young. The oldest was only in his teens, while the youngest seemed like a child. However, his face was filled with rudeness as he brandished a dagger. "Piss off! There's no place for you here." Li Qingshan did not move at all. He closed his eyes. Strangely, after taking a detour, he felt that he was getting closer to Chen Rongji. The demon folk were immediately completely infuriated. They surrounded him with a mess of weapons. "Blow up his head. I want to eat his liver." Li Qingshan opened his eyes and activated his earth force field. With a plop, a few demon folk collapsed from their own weight, reduced to a pile of minced meat. He stood still and closed his eyes again, continuing to search for new clues. In the depths of the alleyway, a woman walked out shakily. She was as young as the demon folk, pretty and petite. She was also just a young girl. She came in front of Li Qingshan, and with a rip sound, she actually tore off all the torn clothes on her body, and said flatteringly, "Sir, how do you want to play?" "I'm not playing." Li Qingshan felt a little helpless. The girl's expression changed. She turned around and fumbled for a few pieces of crushed silver from the pile of meat. She also took off her earrings and jewelry, knelt down and raised her hands, offering them to Li Qingshan. Don't. Li Qingshan became even more impatient. The girl screamed and staggered backwards. No, don't kill me. I beg you. Why would I kill you? Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. But the girl was stunned. In her mind, since it was not for lust, nor was it for wealth, he could only be killing for fun. Because I'm a good person. Li Qingshan shook his head. He sorted through the clues and continued on his way. The girl was stunned. Only after quite a while did she return to her senses. She chased after him out of the alleyway and asked loudly at his back, "What's your name?" Lei Feng. Li Qingshan vanished into the night without even looking back. He felt slightly better for some reason. However, before long, he saw the girl again. Beside her was a large group of people, all dressed in the same black uniform. Some wielded sticks of water and fire, while others carried chains. Every single one of them was fierce-looking and harbored ill intentions. The girl pointed at Li Qingshan excitedly. "Sir Demon General, it's him. He's that Lei Feng. He didn't ask for any benefits, yet he still says he's a good person." Li Qingshan was stunned. His face darkened. This girl called the police. Or the city management. Who cares? Demon folk will always be demon folk. Very bad, little bitch. You've done a great service by reporting him. You'll be heavily rewarded. We won't let a good person go, nor will we wrongly accuse a bad person. The demon general sneered and waved his hand. Take him down. This kid must be from the Ming cult. The ground was turned into mush, including the demon general. The girl screamed and collapsed on the ground. In her mind, the demon general was already an undefeatable expert, yet he ended up the same as those hooligans. Just what kind of monster was he? Li Qingshan walked over step by step. She collapsed on the ground again. She couldn't even beg for mercy. She could only close her eyes and wait for death. However, the footsteps passed by her. He said, "If there's a next time, I'll kill both of you." It was exactly because he heard the weak heartbeat that he chose to take action. Now, he could not help but laugh at himself. He had only saved a vile spawn. The child of a demon folk was obviously still a demon folk. Compared to being born in a damned place like this, he was better off not being born. Though, what the hell was the Ming cult? The girl was dumbfounded. She only returned to her senses after quite a while. She rubbed her slightly bulging belly with both hands. She had no idea what this man called Lei Feng was thinking at all. The child in her belly was the child of a demon general. It had taken her quite a lot of effort. It could be sold for a great price in the nursery. She resisted desperately because she was afraid of ruining this deal. Otherwise, playing around with those hooligans was nothing. Anyway, there must be some great scheme behind all this. Li Qingshan circled around the city a few times. He did not strike again, nor did he find Qian Rongji. Every time he felt like he was very close to her, he would suddenly miss. Her location was erratic, sometimes to the east, sometimes to the west. If she was not constantly moving, then some power was messing with fate, obscuring her location. He could not help but find this strange. He was a human immortal after all, and he possessed the perfect bloodline of a spirit turtle. Just how did this woman manage to do it? At this moment, he felt an aura rapidly approach him. Raising his head, he saw a thin figure fly down from the top of the building. He carried a blade on his back and was masked in black clothes, with a ball of fire embroidered on his chest. He landed before him gently and silently, clasping his hands sternly. "May I ask for your name, sir?" "Li Qingshan." A gleam of light flashed through the man's eyes. He became even more courteous. "Our cult master requests your presence." "The Ming cult?" Li Qingshan's expression was rather strange. "That's right." The man in black was filled with pride. He could not help but puff out his chest too. He pulled off his mask. "I am one of the 4 great guardian kings of the Ming cult, the green-winged Bat King. I've come to invite you under the cult master's orders, sir." The corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitched. He confirmed some of his guesses. That damned woman was actually bold enough to plagiarize his novel. Yep, even though he had copied it. And the green-winged Bat King before him did not seem like a demon folk at all. His expression was also very sunken, but he did not give off any perverse or evil aura. Instead, he gave off a heroic and stirring aura. How strange. It was strange no matter how he thought about it. Had that crazy woman changed? No, that was impossible. You're the cult master? The Radiant King. Chapter 1591. The Radiant King? Li Qingshan found it utterly absurd. If that crazy woman could be called the Radiant King, then shouldn't he be calling himself the Buddha? He could not help but mock her slightly. The green-winged Bat King gazed at the sky. The rain continued to patter down. There was not even a single star. There was no light at all. Even if it was sunny and daytime in the demon domain, there was only a single black sun. Sir, I know you look down on us despicable demon folk, but there are countless loyal and righteous demon folk too. The cult master once said to us, light is in everyone's hearts. You are the light of the demon domain. Even if we all die in battle, there will be thousands of people who will stand forward and fight against evil. Li Qingshan was taken aback. He had spoken from the bottom of his heart. He was completely sincere. Let alone the demon domain, there were not many people like him even in the regular world. He patted his shoulder. Well done. Take me to see your cult master. Qianrongji, I'd like to see what you're up to. Sir. The green-winged Bat King unfurled his cloak and took off into the air. He passed through the rainy night like a bat and flew towards the edge of the city. The gurgling of water was deafening. The sewage from the city formed a great waterfall, pouring into a great swamp and giving off a pungent smell. The green-winged Bat King nodded at Li Qingshan behind him before leaping into the waterfall. Li Qingshan followed closely behind. In that moment, a huge, black shadow rushed over. The ear-piercing shriek made the air tremble, completely drowning out the rumbling of the waterfall. Bats. As it turned out, the black shadow was countless large bats. He raised an eyebrow and was about to clean them up casually. Sir, please don't harm them. They're natural sentry posts. Sigh, they were demon folk in the first place. They couldn't survive above, so they were reduced to the sewers and fed on trash. They gradually demonified. Perhaps it was because he had been named the green-winged Bat King, but he developed a special feeling towards these demonified bats. However, the deterrent aura he gave off prevented the bats from attacking. They circled around in the surroundings madly. Li Qingshan also noticed that the bodies of these bats still retained human characteristics. There were males and females, old and young, but their faces were ferocious and inhuman. But compared to this, the gaze of the green-winged Bat King that was filled with sympathy surprised him even more. After passing through the dense mass of bats, the scene before his eyes suddenly became clear, and a wide and deep passageway appeared before his eyes. It caused him to recall the complicated underground caves in Azure County all those years ago. However, everything here was man-made. Huge stones were piled up seamlessly, and the dome was over 100 feet high. If one did not consider good and evil, beauty and ugliness, this demonic city was truly magnificent and extraordinary. It was more spectacular than any city he had ever seen. After entering the underground passageway, the green-winged Bat King also relaxed a lot. As he led the way, he introduced, "My lord, although this is the Taotai realm, all the devil cities in the devil domain were built by the disciples and grand-disciples of the devil god Jia. They are most proficient in building machinery. When we build the sewers, we'll use the earth and stone we excavate to build skyscrapers. The cult master has said that we demon folk are actually very clever and hardworking. We've just been brainwashed and used, blinding our true selves." Yeah, that makes sense. Li Qingshan nodded, but he thought inside, aren't your true selves demon hearts? You seem more like you've been brainwashed and used like this. Your cult master must have ulterior motives. He'll sell you out at any moment. There must be some great scheme behind all of this. You said this is the Taotai realm, which is also the territory of the Taotai demon god. It's been nice of you not to be suppressed here. Right now, he maintained his vigilance against all demon gods. Let alone demon gods themselves, even evil gods were difficult to deal with. He felt more and more like there was a scheme here. Qianrongji was only a demon king. How was she supposed to oppose him? Thank you for your concern, my lord. This place has been extended and expanded countless times over the past tens of millions of years. It's been abandoned and collapsed, so the terrain is complicated. It's completely become a maze. And the power of the chaotic demon god permeates this place. Without anyone to lead the way, even demon kings will lose their way and be trapped here in the end. If those pieces of trash on the ground want to find us, they'll have to tear down the entire demonic city and dig up everything within a range of 50 kilometers. Li Qingshan immediately understood what the power that was interfering with his divination was. And the deeper they went into this maze, the stronger the power became. But there were still loopholes. What will happen if one of you is captured? For example, the green-winged Bat King said calmly, I'll immediately destroy my own demon heart. And actually, we don't know the exact location of the main altar. The passage ahead suddenly stopped. It was a collapsed, abandoned dead end. However, on the vast waterway stood a vermilion door. The paint was mottled, and the nails on the door were rusted. A golden sun was painted in the center, but it had also been eroded by the passage of time. Apart from the stone lions on both sides of the door, there was nothing else in the surroundings. It was just a lonely door. My lord, we've arrived. The green-winged Bat King stood in front of the door. The eyes of the two stone lions suddenly turned and stared at them. With a creak, the vermilion door slowly opened. Li Qingshan looked inside and saw a chaotic whirlpool. Interesting. Li Qingshan was a step ahead. He stepped over the high threshold and stepped into a shrine. Everything was immersed in the tranquil darkness. The candles burned silently, blooming with light. Pairs of eyes looked over from the darkness. There was only vigilance but no malice. When the green-winged Bat King appeared, the candles surrounded him. An old man with a walking stick asked, Bat King, is this the guest that cult leader invited? Yes, where is cult leader? He's teaching the children in the shrine. A child tugged at the corner of the green-winged Bat King's clothes. Uncle Green-Wing, is it still raining outside? What's it like when it rains? You'll know when you grow up. The green-winged Bat King smiled and rubbed the child's head. He was about to speak to Li Qingshan when he discovered that Li Qingshan's figure had already disappeared. After entering this shrine, Li Qingshan immediately grasped the trajectory of fate and determined the location of Qianrongji. In the shrine, millions of candles flickered and were reflected in the eyes of the children. A figure sat in the warm candlelight and was lecturing, You are all brothers and sisters. You must love each other. That voice was faintly discernible as if it came from a faraway place. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman, young or old. However, there was a strange magic that directly poured into the hearts of the children. Cult leader, my heart feels terrible. A child pressed his chest. His devil heart was beating violently as if it was about to be torn apart. Two kinds of thoughts were fiercely clashing in his heart. But when a hand grasped his hand, the pain was gone, and it became very warm. You have to endure it, understand? I understand. Today's lesson ends here. You can all leave. My guest is here. Li Qingshan stepped into the shrine and looked coldly at the cult leader. His gaze pierced through the veil and discovered that there was still a layer of chaos behind it. It was almost impossible to see her true appearance. His eyes focused and a mysterious light suddenly appeared. Just now, he had completely seen through her. Qianrongji, what the hell are you doing? Is it just you? Qianrongji seemed a little disappointed. Alright, I welcome you. Cut the crap. Bring me to Qingqi Mountain immediately. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.